Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Spooky Japan Podcast. Hoping everyone is doing well today. Today, we have a very special guest with us, author Craig Owens. How you doing, Craig?
Fine, fine. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Terrific. I
We're
knew this
excited.
this fancy microphone would come in handy someday.
I've been excited to have you because I've seen pictures of you, also seen your other podcasts, and I just have to say, Irene, I
Yeah.
will say that I won't ever say we've had anyone on the show with bad style, but I will go ahead and say this now. I think
Mhm.
Craig wins best style.
Mhm.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
I
Thank you
wish
very
that
much.
style was I wish that style was still in today, that a lot of people wear it, but unfortunately
Yeah.
it's just not.
Well, sometimes I get dressed up in the suit and in the tie, but I don't wear that all the time. And quite frankly, you caught me just after picking up my kids from school.
Mhm.
So jumping on real quick, but I had to put on the trademark hat at least. So, Spooky Japan podcast. I know you're going to be asking me questions, but I got a question for you.
Okay.
How did this come about? I've done some work on Japanese TV, and it was very funny what I got from them and what I got from the translator is that there's a major cultural difference between like Western hauntings and Eastern hauntings
Mhm.
and how they're perceived.
Mhm.
And can you just give me a quick answer as to how does Japan view spooky stuff like hauntings, like ghosts, like
They
paranormal?
don't. They don't. Amanda will tell you, nope, don't go
Nope.
there.
Yeah, when I first came to Japan, the first thing I was active in a paranormal back in the States, so then I came to Japan, I was like, yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is jump into the paranormal community. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to meet the teams. I'm going to go to haunted places. Then I started trying to look up all the teams and everything else, and I found absolutely nowhere to book to investigate. I found absolutely no teams. Then finally, I found Irene in Tokyo on social media, and she's like, "Yeah, you're not finding them because they don't exist. But congratulations, you found a paranormal community in Japan."
Me.
Yeah, she's like, "You found them. Congrats, this is it. You found a whole community."
So this is it then, right? This is the whole paranormal community in Japan.
Yes, and I know some people say, well, you see some people do videos or write books about the urban legends, but the
Mhm.
funny thing is, I think they consider the urban legends more storytelling than
Yeah.
paranormal here, because
Yeah.
everyone here loves a good scary story, so that's what
Mhm.
it is to them. And also to them, it's just like lessons or punishments.
Uh
Mhm.
huh. So I know that there are some countries, in that part of the world that doesn't even allow paranormal equipment, or at least that's what I've been told. I want to say Vietnam may be one of them,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's very taboo. And interestingly enough, I was in Russia and back in 2000, 2001, and 2002, and there was ghost hunting mania was
Mhm.
all over the United States with multiple TV shows going on with high
Mhm.
ratings and nothing on Russian TV about
Yeah.
it, and they also have kind of a negative feeling attitude towards that. It's very scary to them. And I tried to get into a house in St. Petersburg where Rasputin was supposedly killed in the basement.
Mhm.
And they wouldn't let me down there. They were like, going, "You don't need to see that." It's like,
Yeah.
look at the beautiful antiquities we've got on the first and second floor. You don't want to go down there.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's really the one place I do want to go,
Yeah.
because I had heard rumor that it's haunted. Well, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so I never could get down there to see where Rasputin supposedly died many deaths before he officially died.
Hmm.
He was like a hard guy to murder according to the history. And,
Mm,
and they were trying to, to murder it over and over and over again. But
mm,
yeah, so I'm always going to be curious about that place until I actually get down there and see
mm,
that basement. But yeah, I mean, when I was asked to do a show in Japan for a segment, it was for the Haunted Mansion movie, and they wanted to visit a haunted location in Southern California.
mhm,
So I gave them several options for which they can choose, and
mhm,
they eventually chose the Glen Tavern Inn, which isn't really in LA. It's in Santa Paula,
mhm,
California, a small city by comparison, and they had fun, but
mhm,
they got spooked very easily.
mhm. Yeah, they're not really. You gotta find a certain type of people
I gotta let
who
my
are.
dog out. Hold on. Keep
Yeah,
talking. I can hear you.
yeah. You have to find a certain type of people who are really into. There are certain people who will I don't know understand paranormal, but not all of them want to. Like they
Just leave the
don't
door open.
want to be. I don't know. I don't even. I can't even find the right words to put in it. Right
Mm-hmm.
to explain what I'm trying to say, because it's more like an entertainment thing.
Mhm.
It's really not really studying it as per se like what we do, right? They
Mm-hmm.
only look at it as entertainment in Japan. They're really not into uh learning about it. It's just totally different point of view, seeing it through a different perspective than what we do. Uh
Does the Japanese culture tend to view it as um, evil?
Not really. They just call it, well, they think of it like, okay, here's an example. You're on this side of the street. I'm on this side of the street. Don't come and bother me on this side of the street, but I won't come and bother you on your side of the street. That's how they view it.
That
Okay.
is a true story. I've
Yeah,
had that happen to me.
yeah, yeah.
Because as I
It's
tell people, my first experience paranormal wise in Japan was I was walking my dog and I see up ahead on the other side of the street
mm-hmm,
a shadow figure,
mm-hmm,
and it's just standing and staring at me. And I am not used to them just standing and staring. And it
Mm-hmm.
was big, it was solid, it was there's no way you couldn't tell it was there. And I'm not
yeah,
used to them standing and staring because usually shadow figure, especially in America, you either just caught it on, just happened to get lucky and you caught it in a picture or it
mm-hmm,
kind of ran by or you just kind of, in and out. Here it's
yeah,
standing and staring at me.
yeah,
But luckily, like I said, I had my dog. So
yeah,
my dog reacted as she saw a person. So I'm like, okay, my dog sees this, so I'm not going crazy.
yeah,
And a lot of people are like, how come you don't try to take pictures of it, try to communicate? Because it tells me they say they don't want to.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And it's just one of those, they're just making it known because for some odd reason, and it's not any rhyme or reason,
mm-hmm,
they just decided to pick their own little area
mm-hmm,
and said, this is my area, don't come in it.
mm-hmm,
Stay on the other side of the road if you have to come this way.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. I just, like, all right, I'll just stay on the other side. I'm not you if that's your boundary, I'm not gonna cross it. I'm not gonna upset you to find out what happens.
yeah,
It's funny. The I didn't believe in shadow figures at all,
mm-hmm,
and I grew up not even really hearing about them as a child. So it was a fairly new concept when I first heard about them. Probably around 2008, 2007. I mean, I know they've been around for a lot longer than that, of course, but it just never was something that I came across in reading or anything. But so I saw shadow figures on some of the reality TV shows, and I just I didn't buy into it. I thought this
Mm-hmm.
is a crew member or something. And then I did a photo shoot at the Mission Inn in Riverside, California. And for those who don't know what the Mission Inn is, it's a huge um, hotel that is built to that looks very Gothic, very Spanish looking.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally built to look like a Spanish California mission, and the owners just kept adding to it from like 1906 to like 1932,
Uh-huh.
and so it's huge. It occupies this large square block, and it has Gothic architecture. It has Spanish Revival. It's got Moorish. It even has Japanese architecture that was added to it a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a real weird assortment of eclectic shapes and styles. But I was doing a photo shoot in one of the more expensive suites on the very top floor, and was not the photo shoot was not going very well for me. There was nothing wrong with the model who was dressed in 1920s clothing, and the problem was that there was a vibe to that room, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so like dark that no matter how many lights I tried to shine to light it up and make it bright and more cheerful, it just
Yeah.
seemed to like absorb the light, and it was just always I never had enough light to get it to look the way I wanted it to look. So it was a little after midnight. I got a phone call. I stepped outside of the suite and I was walking across a courtyard out in the open on the top floor. And after about a 10-minute conversation, I was walking back to the suite, there was a motion off to the side that caught my eye.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those corner the eye, movements. So I stop and I'm looking in the direction, and all there was it's hard to describe, but I'll do my best. It's like an open mouth tunnel, look kind of like a dungeon, but it's on the top floor. You just walk right into the hallway slash tunnel a bit, and there's a room door to one side, and then there's a little alcove on the opposite side that
Mm-hmm.
had two doors. And then if you go straight down, there's a glass door, and once you open the glass door, you're literally inside the main building. So there's this open mouth hallway, and it's all brick, so it looks very like Jack the Ripperish, very gothic looking and mysterious. And so I'm looking down this hallway, and I don't see what I guess I'd never seen a ghost before, but from what I could picture as a ghost, I didn't see anything like it. It was just there were some low hanging lights, and they were casting shadows of the brick onto the wall. But as I was kind of scanning around, there was what looked like a shadow of something. And, you know, pareidolia, what I was seeing, I can describe it to you, but I didn't take it seriously. I only took it as a shadow. It looked two dimensional. It did look darker than dark,
Mm-hmm.
but it looked like something that was maybe a figure of some kind, about 5 feet tall, wearing some kind of cowl or loose clothing. And it almost all I can really make out was what could look like a head, what could look like a shoulder. And it looked like it was like actually peering around the corner of the alcove, which would be, on to one side of the tunnel hallway. I didn't think anything of it. So I'm about to walk back in. I decide to take one more look because I couldn't understand what had moved to catch my attention to look down there in the first place. So I just felt kind of drawn to look again. So I did an inventory. Okay, low hanging lights, doorway at the end, that glass door goes right into the building, lights from overhead throwing brick, and then there's the shadow just on the side. And no sooner did I even just think, what is the source that's causing that shadow? As soon as I thought that, that shadow, which had been kind of leaning, suddenly zips around a corner behind it zips into the alcove, and it does it in a very fast way. And I didn't know what hit me. I mean, I was stunned staring at this, I had just seen. And so a little voice inside of me said, "Well, dummy, go check it out," you know. So I take a few steps. It wasn't very far from me, and I peeked around the alcove, and all it did was lead to two doors. One door was going to be the bedroom I was sleeping in, and the other door turned out to go to another suite, which turned out to be a haunted suite at the Mission Inn, which I didn't know at the time was a haunted suite. So that scared me. I'll be
Mm.
honest with you. That if people will sometimes ask me what was the one thing that, like, the scariest thing I'd ever seen, and I have to say that probably was it, because I walked in, I must have looked like I had just seen a ghost,
Mm.
and the wheels inside my brain were turning around, and I couldn't figure out what I had just seen, and then I checked out the next morning, and as soon as I got home, I slept. I swear I slept with the light on in my house, in all
Mm.
the rooms in my house, for like the next 10 nights. And I wrote, everybody that was into the paranormal that I knew, I asked, "What's a shadow person? What's a shadow person?" And I looked it up online, and I think it was like on Wikipedia. They had a illustration of what looked very similar to what I had seen, except it didn't have glowing lights for eyes like some shadow figure images have. But I didn't get a really satisfactory answer as to what a shadow figure really is. So my question to you is, what do you think a shadow figure is?
I could tell you what that person was. It was a murdered victim in that room. That's what it was.
You think so?
It was a very young person. It wasn't very old, and he was killed in that room. I'll tell you that much.
So that's what you're picking up?
Yeah, I'm right there right now.
Okay.
I'm seeing it right now. What he looks like. It's a young male murdered victim in that room. He was kind of he was kind of angry because he was killed, and yeah, that's why he haunts that room.
So you think it's a ghost, for lack of a better word for it. You think shadow figures are ghosts?
Not this particular one turned out to be an entity. A lot of times, shadow figures don't come off as a ghost. They're not coming off as a spirit. They're coming off as a entity in a way. If they were angry or if they were killed in a certain way, or if they did something wrong in the previous life, or something to that effect,
Mm-hmm.
he came back as a dark entity. He's not spirit's usually white. Okay, they're usually in a white, as the figures of white,
Mm-hmm.
glowing
Okay.
perception, but this one was a dark one. So he was kind of angry. He was something about him that you can't approach. You don't want to approach, or you don't want to go near, or you don't want him to go near you. You don't want to go near him either. It's
Mm-hmm.
just giving off that really weird vibe. Like, nope, don't come near me. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Stay away from me. Kind of like, ah. feeling from it. It's oh, it's kind of creepy in a way. Yeah, you don't want to go near it. You don't want to touch it. You don't want to interact with it.
Okay. What do you think shadow figures are, Amanda? Do
I
you
mean,
think
here
that?
in Japan, they're definitely they're definitely entities who, I mean, because here the ones I've seen usually died in a
Yeah,
tragic way.
yeah.
And as we always tell people, it's funny in Japan because I'm in Nagasaki, which is the bottom part of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
We have more tragic ghosts than Irene will have more of the suicidal ones there in Tokyo.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's usually it's the entities they just kind of take like this dark form as a way of saying back off. This is my
Yeah,
area. I don't want to deal with you.
yeah.
And if they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to deal with you. It's more of a warning of
Mhm.
just don't be in my area.
Yeah. Or sometimes they will attack you if it's one of those entities. So you just don't want to go near. You don't want to have anything to do with them. It's just one of those things that happens. And sometimes they can be really jealous too,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what kind of dark energy you're dealing with. So we usually tend to stay away from them, and you don't want to interact. You don't want to investigate them. Like, no, we don't.
Just because
We
they
don't.
don't want you to. And
Yeah.
they have, and after they've done a little warning of this is my area, they have occasionally just randomly showed up my apartment building just as
Mm,
a way of, I can
yeah.
enter your home if you don't cross my boundaries. And I'm like, I wasn't gonna cross your boundaries to begin with. I
Yeah.
know better than to fight paranormal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know
that's just
better than to make paranormal extra mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
well. I was just curious because I also came to the same conclusion that that a shadow figure is just a certain manifestation of it's an apparitional stage of which a
Mm-hmm.
ghost can appear. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think I'm actually, I have no proof of any of this, so it's just based on what I think
Yeah.
so far in my life,
Mm-hmm.
in looking into this thing is that there are different phases in which a spirit, as you may call it, a phantom,
Mm-hmm.
manipulates and in order to materialize. I think maybe the obviously the lowest form is not to materialize at all, but
Mm-hmm.
then the next level would be maybe a smoky misty kind of shapeless
Mm-hmm.
thing, and then as it tries or maybe tries, that's the lowest end of the extreme is like a mist. The
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of the extreme is a full bodied apparition that looks real
Mm-hmm.
and solid, but in
Mm-hmm.
between is the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a mid level
Mm-hmm.
manifestation, and and then that's why I kind of think it was somewhat shapeless. And I mean, it was trying to take shape, and why it has looks like it's wearing baggy clothing. And when I describe baggy clothing, it's the classic description of a shadow figure looking like it's wearing some kind of Franciscan monk robe, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
everything's a little bit bulky
Mm-hmm.
and flowing. And maybe that's it trying to take shape, that it's not literally wearing a, a robe, but it's trying to form a head, it's trying to form an arm. And if it develops it more, then then it takes more specific shape. The clothing takes more of a specific form as well. But
Mm-hmm.
that's just my guess. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't see apparitions too much. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see shadow figures very much. I did get lucky a couple of months ago, if you can call it luck. Some people don't call seeing anything paranormal as good luck, but as lucky. But I was at Waverly Hills sanatorium, which is an old tuberculosis hospital just outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And I was just showing somebody the very top floor.
Mhm.
And it was two ladies. And as one was coming up the top flight of stairs,
Mhm.
I turned back to look at her. And just as she shuddered and looked kind of strange, I had seen a shadow move up the stairs right behind
Mhm.
her. So that's the second time that I've knowingly seen a
Mhm.
shadow, because I literally turned and looked past her to see if, because I thought maybe someone else was coming up the stairs and
Mhm.
they were the ones casting the shadow,
Mhm.
and no one was behind this woman. So this was during the daytime at Waverly Hills. So I was like, I saw a shadow. But this shadow did not have any noticeable shape. It was just movement and an extra shadow where there shouldn't have been a shadow. And
Mhm.
it looked like it was trailing us
Mhm.
before it dissolved into whatever it was supposed to do, before it went into hiding. That's probably
Mhm.
the best way to describe it. So, interestingly enough, Waverly Hills, a lot of people see shadows there. So,
Mhm.
it makes sense that I would finally see something after being there a lot.
Mhm.
So, I find shadow figures to be very interesting to me.
Mhm.
But but you're both kind of saying that the reason why you think they may be shadow figures is because of a tragic death of some
Or
sort.
some kind of, yeah, or some kind of death that they died before their time, or they died um not knowing they weren't supposed to die, okay, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not, it's it's a horrible way of dying, with the way that they died. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
think we're trying to get at. Not a natural death, right?
Okay. So if it was a natural death, they wouldn't be shadow figures.
Most likely not.
Okay.
At least here. But we
Yeah.
always tell people ghosts here are so much different than ones in the United States. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
just because it's that way here doesn't mean it's obviously that way in
Mhm.
the United States. I know a lot of people in the United States believe if you see a shadow figure, it is a ghost, but they're trying to take they're trying to show themselves as an apparition,
Yeah.
except for the fact is it takes a lot of energy. So being a
Yeah.
shadow figure just kind of takes less energy for them to
Yeah.
kind of
Well, that's what I'm kind of thinking. I mean, I've heard different variations of what they are, and
yeah.
I don't know which is correct and which isn't. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been out here in the U.S. People have seen shadows walk through a wall, or yeah, usually they walk through walls and then come to find that there was a doorway that once was there that was
Mhm.
sealed off.
Yeah.
So they may
Yeah.
think that this is just some kind of shadow from the past,
Yeah.
some kind of residual thing. I'm not sure of that, but
Mhm.
there was another place in Monrovia,
Mhm.
California, where it's an old 1925 Mayan revival hotel.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, the ghosts live in the funkiest places out here in Southern
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
they're all architecture junkies out here.
Yeah.
So this one was a 1920s roaring 20s hotel, and there was a bar called the Mayan Bar. It wasn't a bar in the 1920s, obviously, due to prohibition. They were just storefronts that were later converted into a bar. But a DJ, one
Mhm.
spinning records, he claimed that he saw a shadow walk through the middle of a wall out onto the street level.
Mhm.
And when the bartender told me this story, I said, "Well, whereabouts, did this person see the shadow
Mhm.
go through a wall?" And when he showed me the general vicinity of where that was, I said, "Well, you do realize that was where the entrance door to that store space used to
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
before they closed it all in.
Mhm.
And so we were able to kind of deduce that this is definitely an energy from the past
Mhm.
that's going through an old entrance, going out an old entranceway that doesn't exist anymore. But I find it interesting. I never saw I've never seen knowingly seen a shadow figure at the Aztec, and I've been there plenty of times. But I find it interesting how some people see them better than others.
Mhm.
I I only saw my Meepo a couple of times, but I was like in and out back in the States. Here, I feel like I see them way more, and
Mhm.
it's so natural now to just kind of see them, I
Mhm.
guess. And
Yeah.
they have no problems with standing and staring at you, making it known this is my
Yeah.
area. Like I
Well,
said, there's not really rhyme or reason to some of the
No.
places they name. It might not even be somewhere where they died or even lived. It's just one of those like, yep, this looks like a decent area. This little corner is mine.
Yeah.
Don't bother me.
Yeah. And I
well,
won't bother you, or yeah, just stay away from me, and I'll stay away from you.
yeah. Well, this one was staring right at me, or at least that's the impression I got. Is
Mhm.
that just by looking at it, it looked like it was watching me from around the corner. But as soon
Mhm.
as I started paying attention to it and my eyes started locking on and focusing, that's when it decided to hide and
Mhm.
move out of sight.
Yeah.
But it was blending in perfectly. I mean, it
Mhm.
was two-dimensional looking as anything,
Mhm.
and it was darker than dark, which
Mhm.
is another thing I hear that's pretty common with shadow figures is that it's blacker. It's the deepest black you can get. it's
Yeah.
it's, it's a complete void of light.
Yeah.
So I thought that's interesting. So thank you for sharing your experience, Amanda. Irene, Irene, you've seen shadow figures, I take it.
Mhm. Yeah. Right across the street, there's a convenience store. There's a man who was murdered and his body left in the ditch. He comes out and he creates car accidents. Unfortunately, my husband got into one. Uh, it just hurt his foot, but yeah, he came out and he says, I can do whatever I want, and you can't touch me. I said, now why would I want to touch you, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he came out and he had this really creepy. I don't know. It's just something there I don't like. It made the hair on your back go zook right up, and the hair on your arms go boing. It was
Mm-hmm.
just ooh, like yeah, I don't like you. But he comes out every once in a while when he wants to and creates car accidents.
Mm-hmm.
My husband was the one who got into one, but he just hurt his foot. The other person who got into a car accident last summer died. He was on a bicycle, and it
Mm-hmm.
was an adult male. He got hit, and he was killed instantly. And I went outside. It was almost sundown. I went outside and I took a couple pictures, and I caught him pacing up and down the lamppost. And right next to that place where he was pacing was the bus stop.
Oh, really?
Uh, yeah, I still have his pictures on my iCloud. It's just when I look at it, just gives you the creeps.
Mm-hmm.
He's still there, but he doesn't come out and bother people anymore because my friend who is also a clairvoyant from Australia, we tried to calm his spirit down so he wouldn't be doing nasty stuff to people anymore. And he does, and we haven't had a car accident since. It's just, yeah, you don't have to find anything creepy. in Japan to find anything paranormal. You just go out your front door and you find something there. There's always something around. Like where Amanda was plus, she's agreeing with me. Yeah, she's saying, "Yeah." You just have to go outside and okay, that's this, that's that, that's that, that's that. There, it's yeah. It doesn't matter where you are in Japan. You know there's always something paranormal going on, and you don't need to buy tickets. You just have to go outside and look at it, and there it is, right there. It's just yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so. There's a lot of elements in Japan that might be conducive to paranormal activity. I mean, you're surrounded by water, right? There's
Mhm.
there's what, volcanic activity. There's
Mhm.
um, not to mention history, which I think is probably
Yeah.
the most
Yeah.
common link to
Yeah.
all hauntings
Yeah. Yeah.
is history and emotional attachment to
Yeah.
a location,
Yeah.
whether it be a building or the land itself, or
Yeah.
sometimes people, but it's
Yeah.
mostly location.
It's
Uh, so
creepy. Sometimes it's creepy. Sometimes you can't find anything. There's no vital records. There's nothing that you can find about the place, about the history of the place. They don't have that here. It's just don't doesn't exist. If it existed, it's shredded because they don't want anybody to know what happened there because it was bad or whatever. Amanda will try and tell you the same thing. There's no way you can find anything about history. There's the only way you can find out something historically what happened there is by asking an older person, like an 80-year-old old woman or an old man. They'll tell you what happened. It might sound like an urban legend, but 90% of urban legends in Japan are basically based off true stories.
mhm,
So yeah, it's just the creep factor kind of like makes it go up 100%.
sure.
So,
Well, it's
yeah,
fear of the unknown,
yeah,
and being in a place where the history of it is fairly unknown
yeah.
makes it all the more confusing when you see
Well,
things
you
happen.
had samurai warriors fighting, doing battles up certain mountains. So you'll find the mountains would be haunted, and in place of that area, you find a shrine, or you find some kind of like some kind of like an old history god who
Hmm.
protects the area. But it's haunted. The shrines are haunted. Yeah, and Amanda will say shrines are haunted in Japan too. So yeah, it's to protect the area it protect the people from being harmed in that area. But you know what? It doesn't work. It's still haunted, and they'll still hang around that area, and you'll find a lot of paranormal around shrines in Japan too. So
It's
yeah.
like I said, I mean, we don't have teams, so basically their whole thing is what do we do if we think there is a malevolent spirit is we'll build it a shrine and hope it
Mhm.
appeases it enough to not wreak havoc in our lives.
Yeah. But they
Okay.
s- they still wreak havoc with the shrine in it. So,
Hmm.
and a lot of times the shrines are closed around 5 o'clock at night because they don't want it. They don't want people getting hurt. They don't want it. They don't want the spirit to get angry. So they close it as soon as sundown goes. So you can't venture in there anymore after 5 o'clock at night.
I see. Yeah, I told the Japanese film crew that they need to do a show and bring me out to Japan so that I could so that I could investigate some places there. They just kind of ha ha ha, yeah, that would be great. Bye.
And even
Yeah,
Bree's laughing you off. He's like,
Yeah,
yeah, sure, sure, must be in Japan.
yeah.
right. He said, well,
Yeah, good luck to that one
right.
because at some places here, like there's a lot of places you can visit, but there's other places you shouldn't.
Yeah.
That's why they don't want you walking around there because they don't want you getting hurt. Because there's a lot
Well,
of places here that will kill you if you get sick and die the next day. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that's Japan for you.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but you come
Uh,
home in a box the next day.
all right.
That's how bad it is. I mean, they'll make you violently sick, and they'll eventually take your life. I
Mm,
mean, I've seen it happen a couple times.
mm.
Yeah, places where I lived, places where I've been to, places where I've seen. Yeah, they're not afraid to do that either. So you pick and choose your battles. You pick and choose your poison. In a way, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm definitely curious about seeing Japan. I mean, you definitely have to be respectful,
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and I would imagine it's got to be amped. The respect has to be amped if you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for, the paranormal in
Mm-hmm.
Japan.
That
Mm-hmm.
is one
Um,
thing I tell Americans if you're going to come here and do that is in America, I was so used to, you do an investigation and you set up all your equipment and then you start talking to it. Here in Japan, it's
Mm-hmm.
before you even enter, respectful bow,
Mm-hmm.
introduce yourself, say, "Hey, I'm just here to talk. I mean you no harm,"
Yeah.
mhm.
before you're allowed to enter. If you
Yeah.
don't, it's the equivalent of so that way, the one I just said is if I came to your house, knocked on your door, "Hello, my name is Amanda. I would just like to talk to you. You might welcome me in." And be like, "All right, let's talk." But the
Yeah.
other way, if you just come and start setting up your equipment, it's the equivalent if I came to your door instead of knocking, I just kicked it in. Then I'm
Mm-hmm.
here to talk. You're
Right.
gonna be like, I'm not gonna be as friendly to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you this: have you caught any EVPs in Japan?
I don't
Mm,
think I have yet.
no,
Not yet.
I
No.
don't have to. I hear them. I can hear their voices. I can talk to them. I can have a full blown conversation with a spirit in Japan. So, yeah, I don't need. I don't use equipment. I just use my ears, and I can hear them talk. Eh, yeah, sometimes as I don't really like to. It's totally different in America, right? In America, you can talk to them. They're not gonna bother you, but in Japan, they can be kind of like they can be on the certain nasty side depending on which ones you talk to. So you just don't want to interact with them. You just don't want to go there.
Uh-huh.
It's yeah, on my
Well,
side, it's really the creepy thing is like they'll say, "Okay, come and die with me." Okay, um, go and kill yourself. That's the ones that I usually hear on this side. It's like, no, I'm not gonna listen to you. No, I'm not gonna do that. So I stay far away from them as possible. So I pretend I don't hear them, or you say, "Okay, take a number." Like, nope, not doing that. Not dealing with you. You just don't want to interact with those kinds of spirits. So you have
you have to be
one,
respectful, even if they're not respectful back, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you just, yeah, not to even touch them or not to even, yeah, bother with them. Ugh, it's like really creepy, icky. Oof, yeah, no problem. I won't. Bye. You're like, I'll go my way, you go your way. We're good.
Well, while we're kind of sorry if you hear noise, I
It's
live
fun.
right next to a train station in LA, but
Mhm,
so there'll be trains coming through here every now and then. Spooky station, you know.
mhm.
So I know I'm asking a lot of questions for
No,
being a
that's fine.
guest on the
Yeah,
show,
that's okay.
but I do have, I have my own questions. And since this is kind of a cultural exchange, we were
Mhm,
talking about shadow figures, and I told you my story, and
mhm,
and, and you told me yours. There's a weird shadow phenomena that
mhm,
crew members on Haunted Discoveries, that's the show I'm on,
mhm,
um, they saw what is a weird shadow figure that's like crawling across the floor. They call them creepy crawlers.
Mhm.
And then as it approaches they even can like jump up like a spider or something on the walls coming towards them.
Mhm.
It happened to a couple of crew members. They went running out of the
Mhm.
area frightened. They tried to take pictures of it, and there looks like a shadow, but
Mhm.
it's not anything definitive or shape to it. I wanted to see one so badly while I was there, but I never got to see one. What
Mhm.
do you? But we did have plenty of conversations about them, and one of the things that that was kind of bandied around is that a lot of like abandoned hospitals,
Mhm.
prisons, and I think those are the two main ones. There may be some other older buildings that have a very specific purpose. Have stories about these creepy crawlies or
Mhm.
creepy crawlers. What do you know about that? Or
Incubus, succubus.
what are
Or
you? So you think they're not even an entity of someone that lived here? You think it's some kind of energy that has never existed in flesh and blood?
incubus, succubus.
Okay.
Um, what do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't feel like that's human, especially if it's like crawling on the walls.
Yeah, it's something from the past. It's it's energy. It could, yeah,
I, I've
incubus.
I've heard it described as something that's almost childlike in size. Is
That's
it's
why
like
it's called
crawling on all
incubus or
fours?
succubus. It's
Okay.
it's it's it can be it. You
Uh huh.
see, a lot of those things developed around certain tribal places where it used to be Indian burial ground, or places like that can have those kind of entities.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily human, it's an it or a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can develop. It's also part of the land. It protects the land or it invades the land, and it doesn't like humans. It just, yeah, it's like one of those things like you don't want to touch or you don't want to be involved with.
Right. Well, most people like kind of run away or it disappears before it
Yeah,
reaches
yeah.
you. Do you think it's doing that just to kind of scare you off?
Sometimes they do that. Amanda, what do you think? I think they don't want you there, or they don't want you interacting either. It's just,
But what it's doing is looks like it's attempting to interact by coming towards you.
yeah,
It's like an angry spider charging. That's how I imagine it. Like I said,
yeah.
I've never seen one. I would probably have a better insights if I actually did, but
They're like shapeshifters, right? They can do
yeah,
whatever. They
I've heard
can
them
appear
called.
whatever they can appear whatever things that they want. They come back as a spider. They can come back as a child. They can come back as a thing,
Uh huh.
right?
Uh huh.
And change um appearances, right?
I guess. I mean, that's what a lot of people do believe, and that's
Yeah.
certainly the one that I just described to you at Waverly
Mm,
Hills Sanatorium. That is exactly how they
yeah.
describing it as a
It's
possible
it's
shapeshifter,
just yeah.
and that they tend to be seen more commonly in like medical facilities, like
Mhm.
in hospitals,
Yeah.
sanitariums,
Yeah. Yeah.
places where there would be a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feeds off of
Yeah.
that kind of energy.
Morgues, you'll find them in morgues, you'll find them in places like that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm learning new things all the time, and hearing about things that I've never really thought about. when I did my book and research for my book, I was specifically looking for historical ties to haunted historic locations,
Mhm.
and I was able to find some things that were very relevant to what was going on with the hauntings.
Mhm.
Once you find out what the purpose of that room was through the
Mhm.
years, and if you, for instance, there was a room at the Mission Inn where I caught an EVP of a couple of a woman voice talking,
Mhm.
um, and then come to find researching that that room wasn't always a suite you could rent. It used to be
Mhm.
a women's social parlor,
Mhm.
in the early 30s,
Mhm.
uh, all the way through probably till the 1950s, 1960s.
Mhm.
And so, it makes sense why you would catch a woman's voice in a place that used to have, where women used to meet to play bridge and to, socialize, have little hot toddies or whatever.
Mhm.
I
So
think
that,
different, from my experience, different kind of buildings or what they were used for history, I think
Mhm.
attract also a different kind of spirit, even if it's or different, whatever it is, might not be fully human, or it's just it attracts their own kind of thing due to whatever wants to feed off that energy. Because I've been
Mhm.
in churches where they had their own different malevolent spirits,
Mhm.
and people are just like it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a church, that can't happen. But then you meet people like, no, I believe you because I've been in haunted churches.
Mhm.
But they're like, well, think about it. Especially with the church, it makes sense because think about what happens at churches. You have
Mhm.
weddings, you have funerals, so you have
Yeah.
those different energies that they can feed off of. But
Yeah.
also, this is no disrespect to anyone out there. I'm not targeting anyone out there when I say this. But think about it. Some of the kind of people that go to church every Sunday.
Mhm.
Some people who go to church on Sundays are the most judgmental people. And I say some, because everyone
Mhm.
feels like I'm calling out everyone who goes to church. No.
No.
There's some people who go to church on Sundays who judge everyone the harshest, I guess.
Yeah.
Most judge
I can I can vouch for that one too
yeah.
because I'm also okay. I'm Catholic, okay, and they don't like what I'm doing. They think I should leave well enough alone. They don't think I should be talking to any spirits. They don't think I should be doing what I'm doing. It's more like a no, you should be doing it. It's more like a taboo, naughty thing against religious beliefs. What you're doing, so I kind of like said, okay, you don't like what I'm doing. That's fine. I don't have to be there. I don't have to do this. I'm not gonna listen to you. I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm here to help people. Uh, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and you can't tell me whether I should be or shouldn't be doing. It's the most difficult way of, I don't know. They just don't like it, right, Amanda?
mhm.
Yeah, the problem is it encourages people not to go to church when it's because you can't help it, you're clairvoyant.
Yeah, yeah,
And unfortunately, we hear that all the time. If you have any kind of gift into supernatural, a
yeah,
lot of people are just like, "Oh, you're automatically going to hell." So why do I
yeah,
want to go to church if you're already telling me, regardless, I'm already going to hell?
yeah,
Yeah, I know. It seems like a lot of churches have their own policies of the what happens to you
yeah,
when you do this or that, especially even question the afterlife,
yeah.
by searching for it, and not just taking their word for it. A lot of
Yeah,
it's just a control play.
It,
I mean,
it
you
like,
might find something that actually doesn't match what they're literally preaching,
yeah,
and it's this is a timeless battle between
yeah,
churches trying to keep control of the people that go to their various denominations. But I do have a church story to tell you that I think is kind of relevant to what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, there was a former church built in 1890 in Ventura, California, and it's a Victorian steeple church. It's no longer a practicing church, although the original building still stands. Now, when I
Mhm.
was there, it was this really funky 5 room bed and breakfast uh,
Ooh.
filled with antiques. There was a spiral staircase added, and the choir loft was converted into a special. I think it's a Chinese inspired room, and some of these rooms had various themes. Okay,
Mm.
the rector's office was supposed to be haunted, and it had been converted into its own little room with a
Mhm.
bed and fireplace and all that stuff. Okay, so once it opened, the owners started having guests talking about an elderly preacher,
Mhm.
reverend, that was had a foot fetish and would massage the feet of guests in the room. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of creepy.
Creepy.
They'd look up and see this older guy occasionally. And there's this one story. I actually kind of adapted it as a photo shoot for my book. Um, Except I changed the date. I made of the style of the photo shoot. This was something that happened more recent, within like 15, 20 years. Whereas when I shot it, I made it look like something out of a Christmas Carol. But it's a really funny story. The rector's room did not have its own bathroom. You had to step outside to go
Mhm.
to a little side chamber that had been converted into a bathroom. So there was a married couple sleeping in the bed, and the husband gets up in the middle of the night and he leaves the room to go to the bathroom.
Mhm.
And while the husband's gone, this ghostly preacher, I read one of those journals that people write in the rooms. He described this person as, I've seen it described as like a very, like Vincent Price. Okay. Vincent Price wearing a reverend costume. Well,
Mhm.
this reverend comes in and crawls into bed next to the wife.
Oh gosh.
And based on two different versions of the story,
Mhm.
um, he was either sitting next to the wife when
Mhm.
the husband re-enters the room, or he was on top of the wife,
Oh dear.
if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Mhm.
um, when the husband came in. And the husband asked, what's going on here? The reverend disappears, and the husband gets furious with his wife because
Mhm.
she seemed to enjoy what it
Mhm.
what was going on. Okay,
Mhm.
that's one of the
Mhm.
stories associated with this place. Um, what's interesting is that when the owners first bought this church, it had some hanging chandeliers in the sanctuary, the chamber. And just to provide information, it started out as a Southern Methodist church.
Mhm.
Didn't have a very high congregation.
Mhm.
So it was only limited number of people when it
Mhm.
opened in 1890, I believe. Okay, so when the owners got the keys to the place, the kids, their teenager kids, wanted to go there and
Mhm.
check it out at night. So they got the keys, they asked some friends to come over, and they go into the sanctuary. And as they're sitting on the pews, one of the chandeliers starts swinging in a pretty dramatic circle, which
Mhm.
scared all of them into fleeing. Other stories involve the sound of children
Mhm.
running around the chamber
Mhm.
and various parts of the building.
Mhm.
And so all of these stories were accumulating by the time I got hold of it. And there had
Mhm.
been some paranormal books written about it, and some investigators that came in and investigated. And one particular paranormal author wrote that said it was haunted by a child who, or it was either a child or a schoolmaster fell out of over the balcony of the choir loft,
Mm-hmm.
broken her neck, and that must be the ghost of
Mm-hmm.
that haunts the place. Also, they identified the man in black as being a reverend. And so these stories were getting circulated. So I
Mm-hmm.
went in and started researching this place and
Mm-hmm.
found that there was no death, or even there was an accident of a child falling out of the balcony, but all he
Mm-hmm.
did was break his clavicle. Okay. There was no
Mm-hmm.
death. It would have been hard to die. That choir was not very high off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The choir loft. I went and found a record of every single reverend that was there. And I did genealogical research on every single one of them. Not one out of over 20 was over like 35 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no elderly reverend ever assigned to that church. So that throws that into question.
Mm-hmm.
What I was able to kind of pinpoint, and there were some enough tales of children romping around where
Mm-hmm.
I began to theorize that maybe the footsie is not the reverend itself, but a child playing
Mm-hmm.
footsie, and that the reverend is not a reverend at all, but it was a caretaker of the
Mm-hmm.
building. And the reason why I say caretaker and not reverend is that if you know anything about the Southern Methodists and how they used to do things at the turn of the 20th century, is it was kind of an evangelical offshoot of the Methodist Church. And what they did is they brought out uh, reverends for only about 3 years at a time
Mm-hmm.
before they were moved and shifted around from church to church.
Mm-hmm.
So none of the reverends that were coming through were allowed to seek to make any permanent roots at that church before they
Mm-hmm.
were ordered to and relocated to another place. So having an emotional attachment seems highly unlikely when you know you're only going to be there 2-3 years. But they
Mm-hmm.
did have permanent staff
Mm-hmm.
that would take care of the transition from reverend to reverend. So I really think what you're seeing here is a case where you do have children. I think the foot play it seems much more childish. There was actually someone in my group there that actually had that happen, where she woke up and something was tugging at her toes. And when she described it, it wasn't like a fetish kind of like massage.
Mm-mm.
It was more like a child.
Playing.
Yeah. So I think that may be the case, and I actually think the old man is actually a caretaker that would have been there for like 30, 40 years.
Mm.
So I actually, I think I was able to somewhat solve what might
Mm-hmm.
be haunting there. And you're 100% right in that there were funerals that were held there,
Mm-hmm.
and there that may very well be the case as to
Mm-hmm.
why maybe a child's there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've heard about this place because I've heard a similar story at a place,
It's called the
and there was
Victorian Rose, if you've
yeah, and there
ever
was
heard that name.
another woman who stayed there, and she said the next morning she was ashamed because she actually had intimacy with what you described, but she said it felt like more she was in a trance at the time. So I don't know if that's maybe what happened to his wife, or she was more in a trance, and that's why she didn't really, I guess, fully
Yeah.
understand what was going on.
Yeah, it could very well be. I mean, it struck me as kind of a humorous story. Can you imagine walking in and seeing your wife in a compromised position? Can you imagine being a spouse, having your spouse come in and catching you in a compromised position with something that just completely disappears?
Yeah. Like
How
what's
do you
going on
how
here?
do you explain that one, right? You
No,
know,
no, no. Yeah.
but yeah, the place is no longer a bed and breakfast. It finally sold. There were a lot of really odd tales about
Mm,
that place, and now it's like I think it's people rent rooms and live there. So I want to say it's almost like a boarding house. But my understanding from my sources close to that the paranormal activity is still going there. Now the
mm,
owners, they were religious, so they were trying to spin it to make it sound like, oh,
mm.
what's there is angelic.
No.
you know it's it's angelic, it brings only good vibes, and that might just be an angel, not a ghostly reverend that's massaging your feet or stroking your hair or things like that when you're in bed. But I don't buy that. I think that
Nope.
it's just a
Nope.
good old
No.
fashioned haunting.
Yeah. It looks like it's a residual haunting. Um. Yeah. Yeah. People find kind of like different ways to spin what's going on there, right?
Well, they were trying to
Yeah.
control the message, and
Yeah.
and good for them. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
location owners, um, they don't do a good job controlling the message, and then they let people in with
Yeah.
agendas, and next thing the place has a portal to hell or is demon
Yeah.
infested, all because the owners didn't control the message or
Yeah.
even lay down ground rules on what you could bring to use
Yeah.
to investigate. I actually think there more places need to do that, because I'll tell you, Los Angeles has closed its doors on a lot of paranormal investigations and paranormal groups just because of the bad behavior of people coming in
Yeah.
with phone apps,
Hmm.
various phone apps that run, faulty tests. They're slapping on YouTube, false positives
Yeah.
and calling it demon infested or hell or something like that. And owners hate that. They
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, a
Here.
lot of people believe it's that belief though that everything's a demon still. And
Yeah,
I wish that would not be taught, but that's more religious thing. So that's always going to be an ongoing battle.
yeah. You know what? The Exorcist, when it came out in the 70s, spawned a whole lot of demonic activity that eventually the Amityville House and the Amityville Horror cashed in on the Exorcist notoriety
Hmm.
by doing this kind of satanic kind of story that's more fiction than fact. And so um yeah, this brought in a made celebrities out of various paranormal people throughout the 70s. Then it got a adrenaline rush when Poltergeist came out, the movie in 1982 or something.
Hmm.
Then suddenly, and if you and you can fact check me, but go right to the newspaper archives and you'll see a big rash in the newspapers of Poltergeist stories following the success of Poltergeist the movie, you
Hmm.
know. So then suddenly Noisy Phantoms, came into vogue,
Hmm.
and then with the Conjuring movie that came out, now we're right back to demons again.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the networks, whether it be travel or whatever, let's just say travel.
Okay.
I mean, they're following what's trending
Mm-hmm.
in Hollywood. So if The Conjuring, is this huge hit and even the sequel's making money, then they're going to ape that by doing as much kind of Conjuring ripoff stuff by putting demons in so-called reality shows and showing that, and it's throwing everybody way off. It's
Yeah.
throwing the fans of the paranormal genre, and it's also, I think, it's fooling a lot of paranormal investigators,
Yeah.
that are taking their cues from watching these shows,
Mhm.
and then suddenly everything's a demon.
Yeah.
uh I did an event at the Aztec Hotel with a store in Burbank, and that deals with ephemera, and they sell all kinds of, like, not haunted objects, but satanic themed purses and idolatry. It's a very popular, trendy store in Burbank, and good people. I mean, I don't think they're really practicing in any of that stuff, but they kind of are doing it for novelty, really.
Mhm.
And books of spells and stuff. They even sold my book there for a while. So they came to me and they said, "Well, let's do something together." And so it's like, okay, but you have to partner with our paranormal team that we work with. So I said, okay. So that's cool. I met them. They seemed fine. And so I got permission to investigate the Aztec. And I made it very clear to the paranormal team that, I've been investigating the Aztec off and on for 10 years, and no demons, nothing like that. It's
Yeah.
totally cool, but it is haunted, and I'd be
Mhm.
interested to see what people find if we
Mhm.
do a kind of commercial ghost hunt. But I wanted it controlled,
Mhm.
and I wanted people to walk out of there with a sense of what's there and what's
Mhm.
haunting it. So um, I thought everything was agreed upon.
Mhm.
So on the night of the event, the paranormal team brought some people that I had not known about.
Mhm.
Um, and they said, "Oh, yeah, they're members. They help out on events." And I said, "Okay." And one of them's a psychic, and it's like, okay, she didn't want to know anything about the history or whatnot. So I give like a little 15-minute spiel. Then we all divide up into groups and we go downstairs. And suddenly, this psychic comes up and shows off that she has 3 scratches on her arm,
Oh wow.
and lost control of the message. Then suddenly everyone whipped out their spirit boxes, and suddenly it's a big demon fest. And
No gosh.
everything that I had worked on went, all the research that I did, the historical research, even kind of identifying what these recurring personalities, ghostly personalities are completely out the window. It all went Satan, right? Demons.
Yeah.
The psychic self-inflicted those
Yeah.
marks on her arm. That's the conclusion that I came to after studying it.
Yeah.
No one's ever had 3 scratches
No.
that's ever
No.
investigated that place.
Yeah.
And isn't it ironic that the one
Yeah.
person first time there suddenly gets 3 scratches? um, Make sure that everyone sees it. And so that turned out to be kind of a fiasco. So you
Mm.
really have to be careful. But The Conjuring, these were popular movies that
Yeah.
kind of fed this desire for uh, finding this kind of stuff.
I've never been scratched. Not once. So
Oh,
yeah.
I believe that it can be possible, but
It
I
can.
I
It
wouldn't
can.
I
I feel like
wouldn't
that's a lot of go-to for the fake investigators. Oh, I was scratched. See?
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily immediately jump to the conclusion that it's a demon.
No. No.
I was talking to a guy that used to run tours in the first class swimming pool of the Queen Mary, and he had a viewpoint that actually I had reached too. And I thought, this is probably what's going on, because
Mhm.
there's definitely no demon
Mhm.
scratching people in the first class changing rooms of the first class
Yeah.
swimming pool in the Queen Mary. That's absurd.
Yeah.
But what I think is happening, what could be happening, is that something may be actually trying to interact and touch, and they misjudge, they miscalculate what kind of energy that they're actually trying to apply, and it comes across as either a scratch or a burn. Again, this is just an idea that I'm just kind of
Mhm.
toying with. all this stuff happens so rarely, and
Hmm.
it's never personally happened to me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time believing that demons are everywhere, and I think we need to move away
Yeah.
from that narrative.
Like 1% is usually a demon, but the rest of it is just a haunting or
If
visitation.
if that.
Yeah, or visitation. It's not really a haunting. So there's a difference between a haunting and a visitation, and yeah, so you have to differentiate the two. So a lot of people misunderstand what is what and what is what, and you know,
Yeah,
not
I think
all
it's
places are hauntings. Not all places are like that. Not all places have demons because it's very rare to find a demon in in a place like that. It's
I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I've met a demon or come across one in all my years. I don't know that a demon would identify itself so readily as a demon if one did exist. So therefore, I have a hard time even kind of believing in demons. I'm not saying that they don't exist by any means. It's just
hmm
I take this kind of Missouri attitude, like I got show me,
yeah.
isn't
Prove
that
it
there?
first, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have to kind of see it and be able to go through it all before I can kind of, change my mind. And I can be changed. My mind can be changed.
hmm
I mean, on Haunted Discoveries, one of the locations that we did season 4 hasn't aired yet, but we went looking for a ghost and we came across something completely different. And it was, you know, the stuff we were coming across suggests Sasquatch. And it's like, I don't believe in that, or I didn't believe in that, but now I'm still processing
Yeah.
what we came across because it's strange,
Yeah.
and it's something that I've never experienced nor thought I would ever experience. So it's kind of like shadow figures. I didn't believe in shadow figures until I saw one.
hmm
Then I had to like rethink everything, and I'm a believer. So, um, yeah, I see where Thomas said, "Trust me, you never want to manifest that energy."
Yeah.
What specific energy are you talking about, Thomas?
Almost like
Um, oh, the burns or the
a
scratches.
demonic energy. I think what he's trying to
Uh,
say.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't look for it.
No.
Um, I don't use Ouija boards. I don't use I don't use a lot of like occult kind of things. I'm more of a
Yeah.
person that just
Yeah.
tries to stick with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Thomas, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, to me, I'm old fashioned. I like EVPs. I don't like spirit boxes. I like EVP. I like audio recorders.
hmm
I don't believe in SLS cameras too much because I know how they can be manipulated. But
Yeah.
there are certain electromagnetic field equipment that I do actually like using,
hmm
and there are certain cameras that I do like to use,
hmm
and but still, I think EVPs are like probably my biggest thrill since it's so rare that I actually see a ghost, or entity or spirit.
yeah.
But
I definitely I definitely feel like Ouija boards became more popular after that movie, Ouija board
yeah,
or Ouija,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
yeah. If I can't explain it, then it makes it hard for me to accept it as something. I will say this though. Uh, I've heard stories by people that are friends of mine that are credible, that are quite frightening,
hmm
involving Ouija boards. I don't discount that they could open something up that could be harmful. Um, so I just think it's just wise to just stay away from them.
Yeah. Don't touch something that you don't know how to use or you don't know how to close it properly. When you open up realms, doors, and if you don't know how to close it down and put it back and close it down, don't play with it. That's
Right.
the way
Well, the
that's the way.
problem is the movie says the rules and what you're supposed to do to close it. So everyone assumes because they saw it in a Hollywood movie, they know what they're doing. They know how to
Yeah,
close it.
Yeah.
They know how to end it. But
Sadly,
yes,
that's how
because
I would do it if
yeah,
I
yes,
were.
because obviously Hollywood will teach you everything about the paranormal, and obviously they're
yeah,
not.
Everything wrong.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
same thing when they do movies with seances. All of a sudden, there is a seance in this popular horror movie. All of a sudden, everyone knows how to do a seance because they saw it in the movie, and they're starting to do seances.
oh gosh,
They do it wrong
yeah,
because usually it goes wrong in the movie.
yeah,
The practice that they're
yeah,
doing. They're the ones that conjure up something evil using a
yeah,
Ouija board incorrectly. And so,
yeah,
yeah, there's some things that, just probably better to stay away from.
yeah, yeah. I can't stand that because a lot of times you see a lot of crazy people who say that they're paranormal investigators, but they're really not. They just go in there and mess things up for other people. And like, oh man. Like
That's
how
why we call them ghost
yeah,
hunters. It's that's why we tell people there's a difference in ghost hunter and
yeah,
paranormal investigator.
yeah.
Oh, okay. I've been
I've
called both, and you
been
know what? I find them kind of interchangeable, really, personally. I don't get offended when I'm called a ghost hunter. I think Ghostbuster fits better for
yeah.
for the ones that are
Uh
the
like
Hollywood inspired investigators, But yeah, there's a lot of people that are in it for the thrill.
yeah,
They're even though a lot of serious investigations are far from thrilling. It's
yeah,
like sometimes I've been in locations where I feel like, am I actually looking for ghosts or am I watching paint dry?
yeah.
Just very
Uh,
quiet looking at them.
the thing is that if you're gonna go in a place, right, and you're gonna investigate, that's fine too. But don't try and mess stuff up and don't try to, I don't know, create havoc in that place because they could get really angry and the spirits can be really upset and don't try to do something stupid. I don't know. It's yeah,
Well, they want that to happen though for the viewers.
yeah.
That's part of the issue. They also don't realize if you upset a spirit just because you leave the location doesn't mean it stays there.
No,
It's not prison. It
no,
can leave if it wants to. It can follow you if it wants to. They don't
yeah,
realize that
yeah. It can mess you up too if you
until
want
it
to.
finally follows them home.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Well, let me ask you this then. How many entities have you brought home in your adventures so far? Two? Either two or you're flipping me off in some foreign way.
no, no, no. Excuse me. Three.
Three.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had to get rid of two, and one I had to get rid of that one too because I was helping a friend in a cemetery, and then that thing came messing with me, so I had to get rid of that one too. Yeah, yeah. Two I had, three I had to get, all three of them I had to get rid of.
Hmm.
Yeah,
What
I,
about you, Amanda?
I've had a couple, but when I lived before I moved here, I lived in a house in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there was a spirit of the elderly lady who still lived there.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter if somebody followed me home because she was the typical Southern grandma
mhm.
where I didn't pick the house to live in, she picked me. And I think it's mostly because she was a grandmother. She had all boys. I think they had sons. So me coming in with my daughter was she was thrilled. but
Hmm.
also at the same time, we left each other alone. We had a mutual understanding of in the physical world, it's my house. Spirit world, it's hers.
Mm,
We have understanding. We don't bother each other. But the reason why I loved her is because she considered it her house in that
Hmm.
spirit world. If you were not invited by her in,
Hmm.
mm,
she did not let you in, and she was that typical tough Southern grandmother. Like
Hmm.
think of Beverly Hillbillies grandmother. She was like that. They
Oh,
would not.
Granny.
I knew
yeah.
as soon as I walked in that door, something followed me. They couldn't enter because she was like, "Nah, my house. You're
Hmm.
not welcome. Go." And I've
Yeah.
had some people who are just like who were mediums. I went in their energy wise. We talked about her, and she asked me, "Who are you? Why are you in here?" And I'm like, "Because you were not invited by her
Hmm.
energy.
Yeah.
You put your energy into that house to go talk to her." And she's like, "I didn't invite you in." I was like, "Yeah, she's friendly with me because we have that understanding, but
Hmm.
Mhm.
spirit world,
Yeah.
Yeah.
she doesn't want anyone else in there." So she was very protective. Where
Hmm.
nothing, I mean nothing, got into that house.
Yeah. Oh no,
Yeah.
I've heard tales of Charlotte and its hauntings.
Yeah.
It's a very active place from what everything I've ever heard about it. I want to address Thomas's Mr. Gormley's comment. Only the ones looking for help, um, and that's in response to I imagine it's entities following home looking
Hmm.
for help. And I just want to say that, yeah, I tend to agree with that as well. I've
Hmm.
only had one thing happen that I think was weird, and it definitely falls into what something looking for help category. I got talked into going to Pasadena, and I went under the Colorado Bridge, which has the nickname the Suicide Bridge. Um, Over
Hmm.
100 people starting, I think it's 1915. It was
Hmm.
built in 1912 and opened, but the first death was in 1915, and then by the 1950s, it had already surpassed 100 people jumping to their death.
Hmm.
And now they won't publish, and they've got all kinds of signs up and fences up and police patrols, but there are still people that will take their life by jumping off that bridge. It has just developed that reputation and energy that might go with it. But anyway, I was down there at the Bed, which is a park, at night. I don't recommend going there. It's really creepy.
Hmm.
Um, and what's eerie about it is that, yeah, you'll hear the overhead traffic on the freeways, but down below in the Bed, it's absolutely quiet. Not even a sound of an insect,
Hmm.
birds, nothing. It's
Hmm.
eerie, eerie, eerie. Well, I was
Hmm.
there. Now, my friends had caught some EVPs there, but I never caught anything while I was there. But I did the one thing they said, oh, before you leave, you need to tell whatever it is not to follow you home.
Hmm.
So I went through that ritual and I was like, okay, you can't follow me home. And first time I ever did it, and that was the one and last time I ever did it because I got followed home, I think, because
Hmm.
almost immediately things started breaking out in my house. My wife had smelled something rotting in my room, which I couldn't smell, but it drove
Hmm.
her crazy. But the following night, I was alone in my office and I was running a program. I was kind of debugging my computer, and so I couldn't be on my computer. And so I'm staying off to the side by a bookcase, and this male voice says something out of the blue right into my ear. And of course, if you're not expecting someone to speak to you,
Hmm.
I don't know what he said. It just
Hmm.
came as such a surprise.
Hmm.
So I told my wife a little bit about it, and then within like the next day, my daughter was playing with a stuffed animal on the kitchen floor, and she turned and asked her mom why her why her stuffed animal started moving on its own. And apparently it had rolled over on it was on its fours, let me see, fours, and it rolled over on its back to its fours again. And that's when I started getting in trouble with the wife.
Mm.
What did you bring home? And then she heard the voice. So
Mhm.
within about 5 days, that's what, three, four things happened. And then
Mhm.
suddenly it went away. So I reached a conclusion that, yeah, based on my line of questioning, it probably thought I was there to
Mm.
help it, and that's why it followed me back
Mhm.
based on the line of questions that I was doing. And I think it left because I don't pity any spirit that follows me home and has to deal with my kids and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
family life. They'd probably go, "Oh God, I had it better back there. I'm going back." But yeah,
Yeah.
but that was the only time. And so I don't even mess with saying you need to stay here, you can't follow me home. I just It didn't work for me. So I've never had a problem
Mhm.
since that time by not saying anything.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think you do have to be careful. You can't be sometimes too compassionate or make someone that's lost or something that's lost, some energy that's lost,
Mhm.
think that it can get something from you
No.
to the point where it follows you home.
Yeah.
It's not just the ones that want help, but going back to when
Mhm.
someone goes into a haunted location and disrespect the spirit, that's also sometimes why they'll follow because it's one of, and someone had I knew someone who had to clean a house because they went somewhere, they provoked the spirit for whatever reason they thought they're doing it, and then it followed them home. It's basically the spirit was like, "Well, you disrespected me in my home. I'm coming to
Yeah.
disrespect you in your home."
Okay, I have a story to tell about that too, because you just triggered another thing that happened. But yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, and yes, I want to. Oh, I do want to say that what you said about getting revenge or whatever, or tit for tat also can be a motive. And I've always questioned what happened. I've always questioned something that happened to me when I was okay. Uh, I was taking photos for my book. Okay, so and how I investigated for that book is it's called the theory of familiarity. And basically, what I did is I would a brief history of the building, find out where the haunted rooms are of a hotel, and then we'd rent it for like 3 4 nights, all the haunted areas, and then we would stage photo shoots kind of depicting either the ghost or depicting a historical event there or something that brings out the architecture of the room. And then we would heavily monitor
Mhm.
the space and see if we're stirring it, attracting whatever is there to come to us. We're trying to
Mhm.
confuse it to come forward by giving it something that it may be familiar with
Mhm.
visually, even audio.
Mhm.
So we were doing this at a house that was haunted, definitely a haunted house,
Mhm.
that belonged to the family that owned the Pierpont Inn. And again, this is in Ventura, California. So uh, we were there for 5 days, 4 nights, 5 days,
Mhm.
and I want to say, if memory recalls, things kept progressively getting weirder every day we were there. But on the third day, I get this call from my wife early in the morning as I'm driving to get breakfast. And she says, "Is everything okay where you are?"
Mhm.
And I was like, "Why?" Uh, yeah, everything's fine. Said, "Well, something weird happened at our house." And
Mhm.
what happened Now I don't think we had a haunted house. We might have, but I mean, we lived there for about 8 years, and only a handful of weird things ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the same house that had the thing that where I had a burst of activity right after coming back from the Colorado Bridge. This was a couple of years later. So apparently, while I was gone, my daughter was sleeping in her room, and hanging on the wall was a fairly large, framed, professionally hung photo of like a bunny rabbit or something. And
Mm-hmm.
she was going to preschool at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So one morning, my wife went to her room to wake her up, and that painting was off the wall. It was on the other side of my daughter on the twin bed. It
Mm-hmm.
was face up, and on top of it was one of her stuffed animals just sitting right in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't know what to say. I couldn't like leave, you know, Ventura in the middle of a shoot to
Mm-hmm.
dash back. That was the only thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I did get back, I had my wife, recreate what it looked like for me. And it was indeed very strange. But I always, always wondered, was this tit for tat? Did this happen because I was investigating a,
Mm-hmm.
a house
Mhm.
at the
Mm-hmm.
time? And it's like, oh, you're going to come into my house and do this? Well, I can do
Yep.
this too.
Yeah.
Two can play this game. So I've always wondered that. I mean, I've never had confirmation about it, but the mere fact that it happened
Mm-hmm.
just out of the blue, uh, you know, had me question a lot of things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's weird, but definitely they feel like sometimes I feel like because you visited them in their house, they can visit you in yours.
Yeah.
That's also why I say be very respectful, because if it is one of those spirits who are just like, well, since you came and saw my house, I'm gonna go and see yours. There's a good possibility, however you treated it in its house, is
Yeah.
gonna treat you in your house.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And good luck, because they can play that game better than you can. Because I mean, good
Yeah.
luck trying to tell the spirit no.
Well, I
Yeah.
felt it was a little sinister to have a kid, to focus this around a kid. It was innocent.
Yeah.
My wife woke up my daughter, who was like 5 years old. She didn't know what was going on. But at the same time, it did not uh, injure her or
Mm.
put her in any kind of known danger.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was interesting is I told you it was a professionally hung portrait, which meant that it was hung correctly. It wasn't just a piece of rope or chain around a nail. It actually had the hook, so therefore the whole picture had to have been lifted up
Mm-hmm.
and then moved. And it didn't fall on my daughter. She never woke up to see it. It was way too big for
Mm-hmm.
her to have picked it up and did it even in a sleep state.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. Again, first time any and last time anything like that of that particular nature happened. But I don't think I was being disrespectful when taking
No.
pictures and doing stuff. But I always thought you can't help but get a little creeped out and maybe a little touched, um, angry that whatever it did something around your child.
Mm. It's kind of interesting. Oh.
Because it just didn't want pictures of its house taken.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I
I
can do
guess
that.
it's, yeah, it's probably like, I didn't want you taking photos.
Yeah. I don't want you bothering me. I don't want you taking pictures of my
Oh,
house.
that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was definitely doing that. And I had models there, and they were, dressed in various costumes. It was a 1920s house, so everyone was kind of dressed accordingly.
Mm.
might not have liked that style though for whatever reason. Maybe the justice just wasn't something,
I don't know.
or
Honestly, don't know.
whatever the guys were wearing. We don't know, male or female.
Yeah, well, everything was done in fun. I mean, we did get some great EVPs there,
Mhm.
um, which didn't seem to suggest that um, they definitely sounded intelligent,
Mhm.
but not any kind of hidden or sinister agenda.
Mm.
No, no sign of anger to speak of. It just was, I don't know. It didn't really seem like a playful thing to do, though. But
No.
it did seem like it was somewhat of a serious message. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's my story, and it may be something was always in and around the house too. I don't know. I
Mm.
just thought the timing of it was suspicious.
Mm.
That sounds. Yeah, that's the one thing when people that's the one thing about spirits. There's no rhyme or reason to when they decide to do something. It could have been a visitation to something going by, and they thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It could be. It could be. That's a strange place, the Pierpont Inn. Not very many people know it's haunted. However, there are certain sections. I mean, it's a big plot of land with built different buildings that you can stay in, during different eras. Really, the oldest was a building built in 1910, which was the original building. But then they started adding to it in the 30s. They started adding to it in the actually 20s, 30s, and then 50s and 60s. And
Mhm.
it is on the
Mm.
oceanfront property. So there's, according to the employees that were working there at the time, the paranormal activity would come in waves. So it'd be a period of like 3 weeks where a lot of activity would happen. Then it would quiet down for about 2 months, and then it all starts up again. And
Mm.
the stories got quite weird.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, every time I've been in that Vickers Estate building, which isn't easy to get into. I don't even. You pretty much have to get married, and it's great for wedding parties to stay in.
Ew.
Um,
Ew.
but that building seems to be consistent, and there literally was a death there. There was a man who, one of the owners in the early 70s, he died from a brain aneurysm. I believe it was an aneurysm, but he did die in his room, and that room is haunted. I have stayed there plenty of times, and the first time I visited, in fact, the man had a different manager at the time, and they said, you got to stay in this room because something weird just happened like a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
And so I go, what happened? And so, like, there was a father and son ghost hunting team were there, okay? And they had rented that room. And so they had met with the manager, and the manager was like, oh, this is great. And they go, yeah, this is our chance to bond. It's father son. This is our
Mhm.
weekend out. So, well, hope you have a good time, blah, blah, blah. Well, come checkout time, they don't show up to check out.
Mm.
And so after, a few hours, they sent housekeeping in. They opened the door, and the both beds were unmade.
Mhm.
One of the beds had been peed in.
Oh,
Ooh.
And so they had to replace the mattress. And
Mhm.
so they called the dad, based on his credit card information and address and phone, to ask if everything was okay.
Mm.
And that, they wanted to run the charge for the room. And the dad never responded. He never called back.
Mm.
And so they just went ahead and ran the charge anyway, replaced the mattress. And so they wanted me to check it out based on that story,
Mhm.
because, when you have a ghost hunting team, they go fleeing out in the middle of the night and one of the beds are wet. Something must have happened, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I stayed there, and we did catch an EVP, the one person that was with me. But I'll tell you, that is in my top five scariest nights in my life.
Mm.
That room was heavy,
Mm.
and it just, I mean, it was, I couldn't sleep worth a flip. And
Mm.
it just felt very vibey. And
Mm.
but when I came back for my Haunted by History photo shoot, again stayed in that room, and it felt vibey still.
Mhm.
But I guess I'd gotten a little bit used to it by that time, so it wasn't quite as bad. But yeah, I caught yet another EVP in there while I slept.
Mhm.
So just said one word. Um, but that was it. But yeah, I did the research on the property, real in depth research. And I do have one interesting story that a manager had told me, because that place had been rented out as for weddings. Um, she told me of a incident that she had, because she was like the event planner for the Pierpont Inn at the time this incident happened. But they had a bride that was staying up in that same room, and she was in her full dress, train, headdress, and a male voice whispered her name in her ear.
Mm.
And she went running out of there. I guess she went ahead and got married, but she said she would never set foot in that building again, and certainly not that room. And I
I
don't know,
can't let out of there.
this thought just popped into my head, because I know the biography of the man that died in that room. And
Mhm.
I just had this crazy idea. I asked the manager, I said, "Was she Asian by chance?" And the manager went, "How did you know that?"
Mm.
And I said, "It's because the man in question who died there in 72 had gotten married, and he and his bride had lived in that house, and he had just gotten discharged for service for World War II, and he had married a Japanese woman
Mhm.
that had come over to the United States, and they ended up divorcing after having
Mhm.
a couple of kids. Um, but yeah, I imagine I just got, you know, I actually believe every random thing probably does have a purpose. We just don't understand it. But
Yeah.
I actually think that the reason why he whispered the woman's name
Mhm.
is because it also matched the same name as his bride.
Ooh, yeah. Made the
So,
creep factor just go up a little bit higher, right?
right. So they wouldn't have known this, but
Yeah.
that's why I always say doing historical research, doing genealogy on some of the people that died, in fact, died there,
Mhm.
sometimes can help. All locations, obviously, you can't get to those records, but fortunately,
No.
Southern California is fairly, you know, it started developing in earnest in the late, 1800s and throughout the 20th century, so it's a lot easier to look up records.
Can't
Yeah.
look up the records here.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost impossible here.
Yeah,
um.
when I go on haunted discoveries, I do the research there, and there's a lot of, Kentucky locations, some of them built in the 1700s, and various fires, the war,
Mhm.
the Civil War, all these other factors, just shoddy bookkeeping sometimes, and record keeping in
Mhm.
Kentucky, sometimes makes it very hard
Mhm.
to research some of these locations. And I
Yeah.
certainly can't do it as thorough as I would love to, um, because of a lack of records. But yeah, I think it's interesting,
Mhm.
because you can literally sometimes stumble on something that becomes so relevant to the haunting that it
Mhm.
changes the story
Yeah.
to something that's a lot more credible
Mhm.
than maybe some of the urban legends that have just been told for years and years and years.
Yeah. We have a suicide waterfall here, and I've took my friends to it. It's creepy. It's really weird. You can see actually the people jumping, plunging to their death in the waterfall. It's one of the places where a lot of kids, a lot of schools take their tours there to take the kids' class photo there, and in the class photo, if you look very deeply, you can see the residual energy of what's going on there. And after World War II, when Japan lost the war, a lot of people didn't want to be occupied by America, so that's what they thought what was going to happen. So a lot of older people decided to jump into the waterfall and plunge to their death. And it was really bad at one time where there was a lot of nets around protecting the waterfall so people wouldn't jump into the waterfall. But they got a little bit better, so the nets were kind of like removed, and so you could see a lot more of the upper falls, the other lower falls, and you could climb up and down the staircases to see the certain areas of the waterfall. Well, my son went there when he was in elementary school. He said, "I hate it. I hate going there. I don't want to go there," because he
Hmm.
was also an empath, and he said it was the most daunting place. He said, "Why would any class want to take a class photo there?" And he said he hated it. He hated it with passion. Like all my kids hated it, and all my kids had to take class photos there. And this, my son made the most weirdest face, like you wouldn't believe. I said, "How come you made this weird face?" Because I don't like what's behind me. I hate it. Like
Hmm.
I don't want to be here. It's yuck. Yeah, yuck. And I went there recently, and I took a couple pictures. One of the right side of the waterfall, one of the left side of the waterfall, and one at the waterfall. And the pictures came out all white. Like you couldn't see the rocks, you couldn't see the moss on the rocks, you couldn't see anything. It was just like all white, and there's a whole bunch of faces in the rocks. It's like, yeah, and it doesn't normally happen that way because it was telling me to take a picture here, take a picture here, take a picture there. I did exactly that, and it just, yeah, the photograph turned out really really creepy and weird. It's not the place that you want to visit. And inside, where you catch the elevator to go up in the waterfall, the elevator has a little nook in it, in the well, it's in the mountain, right?
Hmm.
And it has a little goddess there, a Buddhist goddess there, saying that this is for the people who committed suicide in the waterfall.
Hmm.
It's kind of like it's protect the spirits in the water who died in the waterfall. And yeah, when you look at it, it kind of like gives you shivers. And when you go to line up to take the elevator back down to the main floor to the car park, it's always really cold. It gives you a really creepy feeling, and just like you're going, yeah, I don't want to lose. Even if you don't feel it, even if you're not feeling anything, even if you're just a tourist there, it just it gives you the shivers walking in that area just to take the elevator back down to the main floor.
Hmm.
And it's not an uh, it's a cool place to visit for a paranormal investigator, right?
Hmm.
But if you can feel stuff, it's not so cool, right? It's just one of those places. And what I'm gonna tell you is like there's one highway, it's a freeway. It goes from one haunted place to another haunted place, and it's just one road. You don't have, it just goes, and the end of the road is the suicide forest. And beyond that is Japan seaside. And that area is where they had the big earthquake. and a lot of people died because of the tsunami, because that whole area is made out of sand. There's no earth underneath the area. So when the waves came in, it changed the whole shoreline, and it's just, that place is also creepy haunted too. So like, it's just like, I don't know what it is about that. It's just like one highway. It goes from one creepy um shrine that a lot of samurai spirits were there, who died in battle, to the suicide forest, to the suicide waterfall. It just, yeah, it just goes right through, and you wonder, why is that one road having that one energy? It's just creepy, creepy haunted. And it's an interesting concept, but yeah, you don't want to think about it. You don't want to deep think about it, because you don't want to know. But it is that way.
Yeah, I've heard of the suicide forest there. It's there was a certain YouTuber that got in trouble for
Yeah, yeah,
filming
yeah,
and publishing something there, but I had heard about it even before then.
yeah,
It's quite famous
yeah,
for
yeah.
those that,
It's Aokihara Forest.
So I tell
It's,
people who want to go there and film, I was like, you have to be so careful because
yeah,
if you do one thing that they find disrespectful,
yeah,
you'll be banned from coming back to Japan.
yeah.
So if you ever plan on visiting Japan again, don't be
Don't
so
bother.
careful about what you publish, about what you do there.
Yeah,
That's one thing they don't play about here is that forest.
yeah.
well,
It's,
is it true that they still find bodies there?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's an open. You could park your car there, walk in the forest, and not come out. There are no bugs. There are no insects. There are no snakes. There's no habitat. There's no wildlife. Nothing in there. It's just dead silent.
Bad energy.
Yeah. Um. I'm planning to go there next year. So I'm gonna do my crazy investigation there. I'll see what happens.
Uh,
I knew someone who went there and they don't have gifts or anything.
No.
When they went in there, the group of people, the second he stepped foot in there, he said, I heard a low hum. But no
Hmm.
one else heard it. So he
Yeah.
thought nothing of it. But it never went away. As he kept walking in further and further, it kept getting louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
To the point where he said 20 minutes in, it was so deafening loud.
Hmm.
I told my friends, we have to go back and get out of here now.
Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
were confused because they said he was the one
Who wanted to
who
go
made
there, right?
everyone drive hours to go there. So
Mm-hmm.
for him to be the one to be like, "Now, guys, we gotta go. Let's go."
Hmm.
Everyone was so confused, but he's like, it was so deafening loud. And then
Yeah.
as soon as we started walking out, it started getting, less and less to a point where it finally stopped after he got out of the forest.
Yeah. It's one of those places where you gotta be prepared mentally, physically, to go in there. If you're not, you shouldn't go in there, or you won't go, or you should never investigate in there. You should never walk inside there. It's just one of those places where it's a no if you don't know what you're doing. Um, you got to be prepared. And some
It's
places
not
you
just
could,
that; it'll take whoever it wants. Like
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
the thing.
and it'll take you. It'll make you get lost, and eventually you could die in there.
it sounds terrifying.
Yeah, depends on how you do it, right? um, I would take a person there, but you have to apply, but you have to listen to me. I mean, I'm not gonna allow you to do something stupid. I'm not gonna allow you to mess around in there. You're gonna go in there, you're gonna be respectful, and you're gonna come out in one piece, and you're not gonna do anything stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really strict about places like that. Uh,
Japan is in general.
yeah, you just, it's not one of those places where it's, oh, it's haunted, let's do this, let's do that. No, you don't do that there. I mean, yeah, you got to be really careful when you go in a place like that. Especially Japan, right, Amanda?
Hmm.
It's just totally different. Haunting a haunted place in Japan is totally different. It can be creepy, it can be dangerous, it can be it may not be your cup of tea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can be the most grounded person you can be, and you still can be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I pick and choose which place I want to go to.
Sure.
I just There are some places where I just refuse to go to, and there are some places, well, I might think about it, but yeah, I'm not gonna, like, I go there with Amanda, and I will go together, like we'll do it together. But there's people that will never take with us, just
Mm-hmm.
because you're gonna have to you have to watch each other's back, right? And if you can't take care of yourself, it becomes harder for us to take care of them. And we don't know how much baggage you have on you
Mm-hmm.
when you go in there. It's just, yeah, you're
It
not
heightens
going in.
everything.
Yeah, you're not going in. Like, we'll say, no, you're not going to go in with us. I'm sorry, I can't take you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that here. You know, from train stations to certain places, like where she is, it's just too much for certain people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's too heavy. It's scary in a sense, but it's not scary. It could be scary. It doesn't have to be scary for us. We won't find it scary, but other people may find it too much, right? So,
Well, I have to ask this question. I mean, in in LA, where I'm from, there's so many different layers of hauntings, historical layers. I mean, you have the indigenous stories, you have the Spanish occupation, you have the Wild West, late Victorian, then you have the whole old Hollywood gangster level, and I, even I think there are even ghost stories, set in the 1980s now, maybe even 1990s. You had mentioned, so what I'm trying to say is there's all kinds of stacked levels, different time periods, different hauntings out here. Um, in Japan, you've mentioned samurai quite a bit, but we have World War II, even era ghosts in Southern California. What about the World War era ghosts in Japan? There
Oh
yeah,
has to
yeah,
be a lot
especially
of that.
yeah.
especially here near where I live, because I live just to the right of me is the Nagasaki bombing area, and just
Mm,
to north of me a little bit further
mhm,
is the Hiroshima bombing area. So
mhm.
definitely, this also goes into the whole. I get more tragic ghosts here, or
Yeah,
especially if we go to the Nagasaki bombing area or the Hiroshima one,
yeah,
you'll definitely see all those, and they're more. And Irene can tell you they're more confused on why
yeah,
they died, because it's not.
yeah,
They're just confused on what happened.
yeah. And where she is, you have the Spanish ship, the Portuguese ship who docked long time ago in Japan, and you have the missionaries who came, who are priests or brothers who came, and they were crucified in a cross on crosses on a hill in Nagasaki, and there's a place that you could visit. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of like gets under your skin there. And they did that in Kyoto too, in the mountains. So yeah, you get that kind of energy there too, and it's also very haunted. You got um a place where there's a where the soldiers came up on the shore on their boats, and it's now a big park. You can't go in there after 9 o'clock. They'll close it off, and if you're there, the spirits will take you, and there won't be a part of you that would be left to bury or to have a funeral or to put in a casket, because they'll take the whole body and they'll just take you, and there'll be no signs of you afterwards.
Interesting. You know, in the United States, um, sometimes ghosts make like the court, you know,
Mm,
become part of a court case, like in Michael Jackson's
mm,
trial for his doctor.
yeah, yeah.
You know, Jackson's ghost was literally admitted as testimony.
Yeah.
Um, but there really aren't deaths by ghosts that have been like legitimized. I think the only one that I can think of offhand has to do with the Bell Witch. It was
Mm,
a John Bell.
mm,
Um, felt like he was cursed, and he experienced all kinds of symptoms. I mean, I'm without having all that information in front of me, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but I believe that he was at the time of his death. They
mhm,
they did write it off as death from supernatural causes,
mhm,
but it
mhm,
was a witch that he was being tormented. But this witch also took the form of an apparition or some
mhm,
kind of spirit form, maybe shapeshifter as well.
mhm,
But that's the only one that I'm aware of in U.S. history. There are a couple of incidences where people dressed as ghosts got
mhm,
shot to death
mhm,
by people that mistook them as ghosts,
mhm,
um, and fired upon them. But you're mentioning, Irene, that there are ghosts that kill in Japan.
mhm,
So
mhm,
I see that as kind of a difference in cultures here,
mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
where in the U.S., I mean, I mean, granted, there's a whole, half the country is pretty jaded as to whether or
Mhm,
not ghosts even exist here.
mhm,
Um, and not to say that there aren't accidents that could have been directly attributed to the paranormal, but it got written off as something else. I mean, there
mhm,
was several years ago, there was a girl who fell to her death off the railing of the Queen Mary. She had been
mhm,
drinking. What's to say that, given that people have felt pushed
mhm.
at times on board that former ship, that what's to say that she could have been pushed and no one would know the difference or
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
know better
Yeah.
about the accident, but it's not ruled as death by spirit.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. They'll never admit it. You know.
in
Um.
Japan,
Yeah.
how do they? I mean, it sounds like it's a big part of the, kind of the ghost lore, for lack of a better term,
Mm. Mm.
of spirits being able to consume people and,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, make them just drop dead.
Yeah.
Um,
This Okinawa was another big place that you'll find. This is still a military base, an American military base, but there's a lot of crazy, creepy hauntings in Okinawa. It's one of the biggest haunted islands in all of Japan. Is Okinawa. Yeah.
mhm,
Ogasawara Island. They just found a whole bunch of soldiers' skeletal remains. So they're gonna be so the air flying it in to take the remains, and they're processing it in Tokyo. Um, and that was one of the islands that's off of Tokyo. You can't get there, but only by boat. It'll take you a day and a half to get there, and the beach is loaded with skeletal remains of soldiers who fought in the war, World War II, and they're just trying to process that now. So. Yeah, there's a lot of places I think off certain islands, little islands off of Japan, off the coast that have certain things from the past that are just being looked at now.
Hmm.
Yeah, war is horrible no matter how you look at it. Nobody wins. The enemy is death, and yeah, it's trying to find these bodies and trying to bring them back and trying to make peace with them, trying to give them a proper burial or whatever that's going to happen. I don't know. The government just found it, so to try
Okay.
to fix. Yeah, it's it's the ongoing thing right now, right?
Yeah, we're finding, weird things. I wasn't in Canada. There was like a school that found like a bunch of graves that
Yeah,
of children
yeah,
that, had been long neglected or forgotten. So yeah, you do find these weird things that, you
yeah,
know, our past still is very much haunting us in one form or another.
yeah,
Um, and the mistakes of our forefathers
yeah.
um, are not going to rest in peace
No,
too easily.
no.
But how many locations in and around Japan, do have places where people believe that malevolent spirits can literally take your life? We talked about the haunted forest.
Mm.
That's an example. Um, it sounds like that waterfall.
They won't take your life at the waterfall. It's
Okay.
uh
Let me ask you this. Let's be more specific, if you don't
okay.
mind, because this is fascinating for me, and I really appreciate this opportunity to kind of share some stuff I know about, but to ask you about stuff that I'm curious about.
Mm-hmm.
What is the name that you give to, like, what's the Japanese word for malevolent spirit?
ねえ、ちょっとさ、幽霊いるやつで、ちょっと人がね、殺されちゃうと、何名前言うかな、それ。悪い幽霊って人殺されるから、人命取っちゃう何名前か言うかな、日本語で。呪い spirit. It comes after you. It's just like undead.
Okay, can you repeat that?
Noroi.
Noroi.
Hmm.
Is that synonymous with demon?
Not demon. It's just an entity
Just
that
an
can
angry
come after you.
spirit. Yeah.
It can come after you, and it can take your life.
Okay.
There are
All
several
right.
hot spots in Japan that could do that. Uh, it's just like they're scattered all over the place.
Okay.
It's not in one area. Um, I have one my condo that I lived. They have destroyed several lives. They have um unalived people several times. They have killed several people, and I know certain people who have died from a heart attack, from from cancer, who were very healthy one minute and died the next minute.
Hmm.
So eh, it's just scattered all over the place, and I've been there. I've been sick myself, and I'm just trying to come out of that one myself right now, who has taken time. It's taken me 5 years to get better. Let's put
Hmm.
it that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, it destroys families. It'll kill you. It'll make you sick. It'll make you lose your income, lose your money. it'll destroy you. If it's not going to destroy you financially, it'll make you very sick, or it'll kill you eventually in the end. It's just one of those things that happens, right?
And what do you, according to, let me just, what do you do to rid yourself of it?
Leave.
Well,
Okay.
there's no one you can call.
Yeah, pack
No
I
up
don't
and
offering,
understand.
leave.
no offering, no blessing, no.
No, well, I tried to reach out. Amanda knows. I tried to reach out so many times to different groups, different, even a church. I tried to reach out. Nobody would help me. So I said, okay, we're leaving. My husband said, okay, we're packing up. We're leaving. We're moving out. And I said, okay, yeah, you just pack up and leave.
From
So
what I've
it's the same thing you do with toxic landlords,
Yeah, yeah,
basically.
you pack up and leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
from what I've heard, the most maybe a temple will do is send you some of their blessed salt for you to try and do your own kind of cleansing.
Mm,
They use blessed sea salt, not
yeah,
sage.
yeah.
I couldn't even find sage if I really wanted to here
No, 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 no. You can't
because
even Palo
obviously
Santo. You can't even find that.
that's because it's not a belief here.
No, no.
If I went into a house here in Japan and I did the whole saging thing, they would think I'm crazy. It'd be like if
Yeah,
I came to your house, let some dandelions on fire, and just
yeah,
use the smoke from that. You'd be like, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
Well, the ghosts of Japan would think you're crazy. They're like,
yeah.
Well,
what's
then
But
this?
people would too, because they'd be like, "What is she doing?" Because
Yeah.
sage, they don't believe sage here.
no.
So I know with they use sea salt, especially like after funerals,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like cleanse themselves before they
Mm-hmm.
enter their homes,
Mm-hmm.
in case
Well,
something did follow you back.
well, let me ask you this: do you think sage would work, even if the entity doesn't know that it's what it is?
Mm, they don't do any kind of like smoke cleansing.
No.
Right.
So even if they didn't know what it is, they would obviously still see the smoke and you just trying to get the
Yeah.
smoke out. And
So
they'd be like,
they'd
I don't.
recognize the smoke, but they wouldn't recognize the sage. Maybe.
Mm,
There's a
they would
theory
say,
that
"What the heck is that?" And like, "What
Yeah.
the heck is that?" Yeah.
there's a theory that, of course, ghosts are, if they're we're talking when I talking about ghosts, I'm talking about the former energy of someone that once lived, a person usually. Um, maybe a lot of their behaviors, what intelligence is left behind,
Mm-hmm.
is following the belief system that it had while it was alive. So if it were like raised Catholic, and then dies unexpectedly, and that energy is still lingering around with perhaps memory. I mean, I know this is all speculation, but
Mm-hmm.
um, because nothing can really be proved one way or the other. But it always kind of made me wonder, you know, whether or not they're still basing their memory and their judgment of certain things based on their own religious beliefs when alive.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, we had when we lived at that place. The only thing that would calm it down was Buddhist prayers,
Mm-hmm.
and my son would do that in the middle of the room. And yeah, it was. I I had sage. My friend sent me some sage, and I did all the windows. And yeah, I said my prayers, and it didn't work with it. Yeah, that was a disaster. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So Buddhist prayers were the only things that worked. It was pretty bad because I got hit several times, and it would come after me for some reason. I was the target. I I just nah. Yeah, I didn't like that. It wasn't fun. It was pretty bad. Let's put it
Mm-hmm.
that way. And I got scared. I didn't have what I had now.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, it was before I could see stuff, and then afterwards you can see everything now afterwards, right? I can see everything now afterwards. Yeah, it wasn't one of the most pleasant places times in my life, my kids' life either, because they all got sick too, and we went to the doctor, and the doctor couldn't explain it, and then we got better, and as soon as we got back to that place, everyone got sick again. So yeah, that's what you have to say. Okay, we're bailing.
Mm.
Yeah, and it even followed me here too once, and it threatened me of telling me, "Don't you dare talk about where you lived before." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's fine. See ya, bye bye." And then, like, "Don't you dare threaten me," and it left. But it stayed with me for about a couple days.
Mm.
I didn't like it. uh yeah, it was a mask, like a black mask, and it had no eyes, no nothing. It was just creepy as can be. It was one of
Sounds
the
horrifying. So absolutely sounds horrifying.
Yeah, it scared the bleepers out of me, to tell you the truth. And I don't get scared that easily either anymore, right? Yeah, it was horrifying. Like, I don't even want my worst enemies to live in that place either.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, I have a few people I might send over.
Yeah, you come out in a box the next day.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Do you have a place that has been your favorite to investigate?
Mine, um, there's a lot of places that I love to investigate. I would say the one that, yeah, I need to give an example if you're going to ask, right? Actually, the Palomar Inn in Temecula, California. It's one of those little known places, but I've always said that it's the most active hotel in Southern California,
Mm,
and it just doesn't get a little hype because it's closed most of the time. It
mm,
operated last year briefly as an Airbnb.
mm,
I got to investigate that several times right after they did a major renovation, and um, and let me tell you, it was incredibly active for about 5 6 months following. It was not a major renovation; it was a minor renovation, but it was extensive. And uh, I was hearing disembodied voices.
mm,
Saw a light turn off by itself. There was a lot of things going on there. So because it's small, I mean, it is tiny.
mm,
Yeah, I always kind of joke that it has more paranormal activity per square foot of any place I've ever
mm,
seen. And it's certainly more active on a square footage basis than the Queen Mary. Although people say hear that and go, "Oh yeah, right." But the
mm,
Queen Mary is actually massive amount of square footage and not as nearly as much paranormal activity per square foot as the Palomar. So yeah, it's also the only place where I actually photographed an apparition, which I did not see. I had to see it secondhand through the photo, but it was a person that literally um, was photographed. It appeared and disappeared. I'm guessing within a half second, but it was
What?
just long enough for me to catch that photo.
What is
Which,
it about hotels too? You don't know the room you're going into. It's just, yeah, daunting sometimes, right?
well, hotels are absolute magnets for
Yeah,
paranormal
yeah.
activity,
Just
and
someone new
I
almost every
always
night.
I always joke that, if you're in Southern California and you have a hotel or any kind of building that's over 70 years old and it's not haunted, something's horrible with your marketing. Uh,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of
Oh,
buildings are like that, and a lot of businesses, hotels in particularly, actually are active,
yeah,
but the owners don't want to talk about it.
yeah.
But yeah, hotels are magnets because everything under the sun goes on there.
Hmm.
Um, especially if they've been open for a while, and that includes death.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the older hotels are more prone probably to be haunted than the newer ones, only
Mhm.
because there was more of a purpose for building it. Uh, there was usually a very specific purpose for building some of these hotels, and a lot of thought was put into them, a lot of workmanship, making it different. A lot of these were resort hotels, so definitely an emotional attachment as opposed to like a Motel 8
Yeah.
or some kind of chain hotel that's very generic and gentrified. But some of these older hotels, yeah, lots of stuff going on, marriage, um, all kinds of probably fornication going on over the years. There's secret meetings between politicians.
Mhm.
Um, there's some buildings in LA where certain plotting for crimes
Mhm.
that eventually took place, a murder that would take place elsewhere, but it was being pre-planned inside a hotel room. A lot of energy there. Divorces, marriages,
Yeah.
proposals,
Yeah.
probably a few births. In some
Yeah.
cases, maybe even a few abortions. I mean,
Yeah.
there were a lot of things that were going on uh, in those buildings. You had managers that lived there, that died there.
Mhm.
You have, interestingly, with high rise, sad really, um, high rise buildings,
Mhm.
because we didn't have health insurance like we do now. And so when
Mhm.
people actually ran out of money, they were in bad health.
Mhm.
In a lot of cases, they did take their lives.
Mhm.
We didn't have mental health
No.
facilities and even understood mental illness
Mhm.
back then like we do today. But a lot of people going through a serious crisis where they felt that they needed to take their own life, they may like live in the town, but they'll check into a hotel
Mhm.
and they'll take their life there because
Yeah.
they don't want their loved ones to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
So it'd be the hotel staff that would end up having to do that, do
Yeah.
all the paperwork, call the morgue, call the police. In some cases, with high profile hotels, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does. It has happened
Mhm.
on occasion where they'll do it to make the newspaper.
Mm. What is your bucket list to visit as far as paranormal is concerned?
Oh well, I have many, 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 but my fantasy place to investigate and spend the night would be Hearst Castle in the middle of California. That was a hotel, not a hotel. What am I talking about? Get out of the hotel, Craig. Um, it was a home, a luxury home, but also was almost like a museum built by
Mm.
William Randolph Hearst
Mm.
in the middle of the state. He had a mistress, Marion Davies, a silent film star that I absolutely adore. But it was a huge, sprawling place. They called it the Ranch.
Mhm.
They actually had another name for it. It was not called Hearst Castle when it first was completed. It was called San Simeon, but that was the little village that was built in and around that area. So if you ever go to investigate there, call it San Simeon because that's what the ghost would probably respond to. But
Mm.
that's where Hearst entertained the his Hollywood clientele. Were so Charlie Chaplin was there, Cary Grant, you
Mm.
name it. Political figures, politicians
Mhm.
visited there. It was such a remote area. It had its own zoo. It had its you could ride. It had its own little sporting
Mm.
fields and whatnot. But it was a great place to meet and greet for a while. Great
Mm.
parties were thrown there,
Mhm.
and it's supposed to be haunted.
Mm.
They won't talk about it too much, but I have met a security guard, a former security guard, that told me some stories that about Hearst Castle when he worked there, and it seems
Mhm.
to suggest that it's haunted, maybe even by William Randolph Hearst himself.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it would be. I drove past San Simeon slash Hearst Castle, and it was all lit up on top
Mm.
of a hill at night, and I was just imagining
Mhm.
that place being occupied by 1920s, 1930s revelers, and
Mhm.
how wonderful and how magical it must have been back in its day. So if I can stay there,
Mhm.
investigate, do a photo shoot,
Mhm.
I mean, you really have to see pictures of this place. What Hearst was doing at the time, it was legal back then, but soon to be illegal, is if you
Mhm.
were super wealthy, you could
Mm.
go and like raid the treasuries of royal families and smaller countries, and he would go and buy whole entire like a ceiling or a floor from a cathedral in
Mhm.
Spain or something, and he would have it brought over
Mhm.
and installed in his house.
Mm.
So it had different elements from all over the world. Some people might find it very garish and tacky, but
Mhm.
I find it spectacularly kitsch. It's like it's so eclectic that you can just stare at all the
Mhm.
details from different eras that are crammed into this large house. It's large enough where it has its elevator, and that elevator would take off only at night, and it
Mm.
would go up to Hearst office
Mm.
on a fairly regular basis. But there are also little adjoining buildings to the main house,
Mhm.
and if I could stay 2-3 nights there with some friends that know how to investigate, and we were to
Mm.
Yeah.
do a glamour photo shoot there to try to stir things up, and
Mhm.
then monitor that place. That would be my ultimate place.
Mm.
Everything else would be like castles in Germany or Ireland. Would love to see that. Love to actually visit Japan.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, these are the places I would love to investigate. I would love to investigate the Chateau Marmont. They're not terribly keen on allowing that. They're just there are places in Kentucky, but it seems like I may actually be investigating them, so they'll be coming off my bucket list soon enough.
Mm.
But Hearst Castle, that's the end all.
Mm. That'd be interesting.
That would be a place I could, I would want to haunt if I were a ghost, probably. My next favorite place would have been the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, but that got torn down. So
Mm.
sometimes my bucket list places don't survive.
Changes. They change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's sad because you know, those places had a lot of history and they get torn down for one reason or another, or because it gets trashed by some I don't know. They call them YouTubers. They will go in there and they spray paint the place and they trash it. Like did that here in Japan of this really cool old haunted hospital. It was one of the most notorious creepy hospitals that was built a little while ago,
Hmm.
and because it was trashed by kids, it no longer exists anymore. They had to tear it down. It's a shame because it was one of the greatest paranormal places to visit if you're a paranormal investigator, and yet no longer exists anymore. But
Yeah, the Los Angeles Ambassador Hotel was, of course, famous for that was where Robert Kennedy was fatally shot. He didn't die he didn't die immediately after his assassination
yeah.
at the hotel. He died in the hospital, but that he will be forever
Yeah.
remembered for passing away in the pantry there. But it
Yeah.
was also the home of the Coconut Grove. It opened on January 1st, 1925,
Yeah.
and 1921. I'm sorry, and it just was anybody. Khrushchev stayed there. I mean, all kinds of presidents stayed there.
Yeah.
Whole careers were, forged there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did get a chance to go in there before it was torn down. And I gotta tell you, this is before I got real active in paranormal investigating. But when I went in there, that place, that whole building felt alive.
Mm.
It was one of the coolest things I ever did was get to walk through that lobby and
Oh,
go
I
to
Mm.
that
bet.
place. It was just,
Yeah.
it's almost like as I was walking by what was left of the Coconut Grove, it's like almost in my inner ear, I'm hearing the jazz, that
Mm.
old jazz from the 30s, 40s,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
live band. And it's just, it broke my heart when
Mm-hmm.
it got torn down. I mean,
Yeah.
I never really got over it because it felt like I lost a friend because I used to live right across the street from it.
Mm.
And I tried to save it. I tried to join different groups to try to preserve it. And in some cases you might say that, my book, sorry to sound like I'm plugging it, but it is top of the hour,
Mm.
middle of the hour. But Haunted by History, it focuses on hotels, but
Yeah.
it was to raise awareness of some of these historic haunted hotels that were hurting especially during the Great Recession. And I was actually throwing business their way. I was paying to actually stay there and shoot
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. I wasn't just doing it for free or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the ambassador was the one that got away. It was torn down before I got involved, but you might say in a roundabout way it inspired me to focus on hotels. But the ghost itself, the various ghosts that I met at the Mission Inn and other places, that that pushed me pretty hard into doing the book as well. Because once I started taking glamour photos
Mm-hmm.
in some of these haunted spaces and weird things started happening, I started really kind of wondering whether or not I was setting it off. I
Mm-hmm.
was stirring up the paranormal activity by actually doing what I was doing there. And I believe my conclusion after doing 16 locations total is that yes, I'm definitely stirring it up by doing those kind of
Oh yeah.
tests.
Even talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes even talking about it stirs up energy. Of course,
Is there a
it
place
happens.
that you investigated that maybe was too intense or too scary for you?
Yeah.
Well, when I first visited the Aztec Hotel, revisiting, that's that Mayan revival place I mentioned earlier. I was scouting it for a paranormal photo shoot kind of thing, investigation. And it was very dowdy and in bad shape at that time, but I rented its most haunted room at the time. And I was staying there and I was interviewing staff. And I stayed there for about three nights. I did eventually go back and do a photo shoot once it got cleaned up a little bit and changed owners. But at that time, um, it was just a weird, funky place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with some real down and out people living there. It was low income housing, but they
Mm-hmm.
had a few rooms that you could rent for under $100 a night to
Mm-hmm.
stay there. It was seedy. It was like a flop house, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the basement, I had heard tales of the basement being haunted. So when I first went down the basement, I wouldn't go down there by myself for about a year. I always had to have people go there with me, and it was very tense. It was very scary to me at the
Mm-hmm.
time. You
Mhm.
always know what place is haunted when you like walk in and you see like a Bible and a candle and a crucifix,
It
some
cuts
table.
like a knife, right? You could feel the air, and it
Well,
smells different. It
it,
just, yeah, you could
it's
grasp
someone's
it in your
idea
hand.
that this is a haunted place and that these artifacts will help save you from whatever's down there. And I've gone into places where I've seen this. I've seen the Virgin Mary statue or the rosary and
Mm,
the Bible out, and I just kind of have to chuckle. I mean, I maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but
yeah.
the mere fact that someone was inspired to put that down there and having that on a table in the middle of a storage space in a
Mhm,
haunted in a basement pretty much
mhm,
tells you everything you need to know about how
mhm,
people felt about that space. But
mhm,
I did investigate down there, and we did catch some amazing stuff down there, voices of all kinds,
mhm,
and um, it was I would say that was intense. I would stay in room 120,
mhm,
which was the most haunted room at the Aztec,
mhm,
and it wouldn't be quite as intense or spooky up there,
mhm,
but I'd spend the night and then I would leave my recorders. I'd put them after investigating the basement, I would put my recorders to record all night and monitor while I'm
mhm,
gone so I can get used to the sounds down there
mhm,
and to see if any weird sounds pop up.
mhm.
But yeah, when I had to go down there by myself to retrieve those at about 7, 8 in the morning, oh,
Yeah.
I had to take like a deep breath, hurry down the stairs, grab them, and get the hell out as quick as possible.
Like
But
get a cup of courage, right?
yeah, but that was then, that
Yeah.
was then. Now I don't have that problem down there. I think I've
Yeah.
gotten so used to
Mhm,
things. I actually, for the most part, I feel very comfortable in haunted spaces. I
mhm,
feel sometimes it's the non-haunted places that
mhm.
irritate me and I feel
Yeah.
restless and want to get out.
Yeah.
There's a certain vibe in certain places, and if you spot it,
Yeah.
um, it feels very. I just feel very at home. So I always kind of joke that if the past lives
Mhm.
are true, then I must have been a ghost in a past life.
Mm.
That's interesting.
We'll
It's
definitely gonna have
fast.
to have you back on
Yeah.
another time where they get that scheduled out. But thank you so much for joining us
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It was kind of funny coming in at, you sent me the link and I went, oh, I better check it out now. And then when I saw you, it's like, oh, yeah, we got to be, you're supposed to be on. It's like, oh, okay. Let me just grab my hat and let's do it.
I will definitely figure it out next
Yeah.
time for
Yeah.
sure on getting together and doing this again. We definitely have to have you on for a part two
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
because there's
Thank
so
you.
much more that we could talk about, but
Yeah.
we're going on so long that
Yeah, I think you got maybe one question the whole 2.5 hours.
we should
I was
have done.
asking you a lot of questions.
No, it's
So,
fine. It's
No,
because
that's great.
we're trying to educate people in Japan. That's also why
Yeah.
we do this podcast. Is
It's
yeah,
because
like learning
we re-
from both sides of the world.
no, that's
yeah
that's the key is trying to
Yeah.
find,
Yeah.
the similarities and the differences.
Yeah.
we realize not a lot of people know about Japan, so this is a good way to
Yeah.
educate because it opens the conversation, but they can ask what they want compared to
Yeah.
us going and we're like, here's just a list of facts about Japan.
Yeah. And nobody knows. It's almost like closed off. Paranormal wise, nobody knows anything about Japan, right, Amanda? It's
Right.
just not heard of. It's just not heard of. It's not be seen, not be heard of, right?
Was
So.
there's that, and I hate to admit this, but the United States is very America centric, and
Yeah.
so we think we're the center of the world, and so it's very difficult to see beyond that sometimes, unless it's to our advantage. And so I'm guilty of that. Growing up in Texas is Texas centric, so it's like eccentric. It's we're the center of the United States. We're the only state that's important. If you're from
Mhm.
Texas, you've got this kind of mentality. So, it becomes like a Russian stacking doll. And I'm trying to undo that by, I actually want to know.
Yeah,
The world does not revolve around the US, and what is the cultural
yeah,
differences, and
Yeah.
what life is like in other places, and what can we learn.
yeah,
I'm glad there's a lot of I'm not alone in this. There's tons of people that are that way, but I'm a late bloomer and coming out and wanting to know about these things, and being the eternal student, and the eternal child, always wanting to learn new things and experience new things.
it's always interesting trying to learn new things and trying to learn new places and different cultures and different how they react differently to paranormal things, and it's always new concept.
I learned something. I mean, I learned more than something, but I
Mhm.
learned
Definitely.
Noroi, right?
Mhm.
Noroi.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
He's
Yeah.
gonna research that later, and for
I-
part two, he's gonna be like, "Here is what I learned about No Roy."
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll be your Noroi next time.
No thanks. Then I have
Okay.
to cast you out. Bye bye.
Okay. All right. No, but no, I appreciate it. I'm gonna look into that some more. I got it written down. So,
Yeah.
I'm from West Texas, so I tend to mispronounce everything. But I'm glad I
Oh,
got
I still
close.
mispronounce a lot of things
Yeah.
here.
But if
It's
Yeah.
you
almost
ever get a
comical.
chance to go and visit Emily Morgan Hotel,
I've heard of it.
yeah,
Is it in
it used to
Tokyo?
be
I'm just
it
kidding.
used to be uh an, an insane asylum, and the basement part where the morgue is now the swimming pool.
Where is that? Where is Emily Morgan?
Austin,
That's what, yeah. It sounds very familiar. Yeah.
yeah, you gotta visit that because that's one of the places that I want to go to.
Okay. That's on your bucket list, right?
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
But thank you so much for joining us,
Yeah,
and hopefully we'll see you for part two one of these
yeah,
days.
Well,
yeah,
thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Irene.
yeah,
Much great pleasure chatting
yeah.
with you and getting to know you.
We
And
had it was a lot of fun.
It
I
was a lot of
enjoyed
fun.
it. Yeah, I enjoyed myself.
I love the little cat appearances that were just flashing by.
Yeah. Holy terror.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like, what did I just see something in your house?
Yeah. He was doing zoomies.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great. Keeping me on my toes, keeping me alert.
Yeah.
All
Mm,
right. Well, I appreciate it. And
yeah.
it's nighttime here. Is it
Yeah, we
morning there?
appreciate it too. Yeah, well, it's afternoon.
It's it's noon. It's
It's noon.
lunchtime. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great lunch.
Yeah.
Great rest of your afternoon.
Yep, and you
Thank
enjoy
you.
your night.
All
Yeah.
right.
Sleep tight.
And
Okay.
we'll see you next time. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining. Bye for now. See you next time.
Bye.